Hi everyone, good to see you on my channel today. Today I will tell you a wonderful story. It is full of love and kindness. I hope you enjoy it and I wish you an enjoyable viewing experience. Thank you.
Agatha didn't think she was doing anything wrong. In fact, it would be more accurate to say that she knew she was doing something bad, but she couldn't stop. The forbidden temptation was too great, and she had good excuses for herself. Undress, the words barely escaped her lips. The doctor wrinkled her nose. It didn't sound right. And yet she was so eager to turn her sin into a performance for him, the imprisoned Joe. Agatha, 30, had grown up in a small town, but not a small town in an ordinary family. Except that her parents believed that after 18, the child is time to fly out of the parental nest, regardless of whether he wants it or not. And ready, they did not put her out of the threshold, on strictly said that she was more than welcome at home. Relations with parents were not warm, so that resentment though there was, but did not wound deeply. The girl entered the budget in the medical school, even successfully settled in the dormitory as a non-resident. But alas, it soon became clear that the genius, capable of claiming a warm place in a private clinic, she will not become. But Agatha was stubborn. Received a diploma, never, by the way, not buying coursework, got a job in an ordinary hospital and worked with dedication, hand, heart, bursting in troubles and responsiveness. But so many irreparable troubles were around, so depressing was every day, as if greeted by the sign, dreams don't come true, and don't get your hopes up, that one day she waved her hand and decided why take it to heart if there was no boomerang for good. But when he showed up, Sam, an aspiring businessman, she fell in love without a second thought. She dreamed of wearing a mink coat and diamonds, eating caviar with spoons. How bent on her friends laughed when she shared her hopes, but it was her everything to the drop, that for the sake of which in the new day she went to the already hated work. The climax came when Agatha found out she was pregnant, except Sam said it wasn't part of his plans. There was a terrible fight, and when Agatha woke up, she was no longer pregnant. And the man who seemed to have taken her heart and shattered it like a glass trinket was gone, running away, taking her life savings and all the appliances from the apartment where she lived. While she was sick, while the whole nightmare was dragging on, Agatha suddenly realized how unreliable, petty many in many years, seemingly friends turned out to be. The only pleasant and unexpected surprise was the arrival of Tony, an acquaintance from her hometown. He was 8 years older than Agatha. He came from a small village called Colorado. Tony had moved to the city for his dream of going to culinary school. They met in the company of mutual friends. Agatha had just turned 18 and was about to leave to go to medical school. Tony gave signs of attention, which the girl understood as friendly. He was the first to visit Agatha in the hospital. For her sake, he took a vacation at his own expense, told her that he rented an apartment and spoiled her with homemade delicious food. To him, the only one, she confided her pain and confessed that she would never, ever love again. He listened, looked carefully, and said he believed that one day she would find someone who would make her happy. Surely she would. When she stopped being a patient at the hospital and went back to work, the head doctor, who had a fatherly way of treating Agatha and seeing what she had become, suggested to her that there was a position in a place where he hoped the young woman could heal through mercy, treating those who were being punished for an atrocity committed. She agreed, just for a change of scenery. But this mentor would be horrified if he knew what Agatha was doing in her office with a man who was legendary throughout the colony. It doesn't seem to hurt. Another unnecessary checkup, his obscenely healthy and snow-white smile whipped into a sneer. But he complied. I know better, she snorted and clomped on her heels. She preferred comfortable and practical shoes at work, but these stiletto heels were waiting for such a special occasion, like the scarlet lipstick carefully applied to her plump lips, like the lacy lingerie set with a price tag half a month's salary, like the perfume with a hard-to-pronounce French name. It wasn't the first time she'd seen his body, but every time she saw it, it sent shivers down her spine, and he seemed to notice her feminine weakness, and for that she hated him twice as much. Tall, under 2 meters, muscular, as if he never got out of the gym. Facial features as if chiseled from stone to pineapple hump beautiful. He was only 24, a boy by her standards. Agatha circled him and touched the hollow on his lower back with her fingertips. A storm of sensation. Maybe you can tell me where all this came from. His torso was covered in scars, and it was eerie, even for her, who'd seen a lot of trauma, to imagine how they could have been inflicted. In her teasing caresses, she'd always skirted them. And then there were his tattoos. Never had she seen such a thing on any of the sitters. What do they even mean, mystery and masterpiece? Hieroglyphics and images of animals reminiscent of cave paintings. If I tell you, I'll have to get rid of you. She couldn't tell if he was joking or serious. She stopped in front of him and pressed her palm against his chest. Her heart was beating hard and steady. If someone had woken her up in the night and asked her, she could have recited his medical records by heart, but the truth was, they didn't contain the things that usually and often plagued the inmates. Joe was strong. He'd never been sick once in all his time here. He'd only been injured, but the injuries he'd sustained had not healed so quickly that a colleague had once goggled and told her that he'd never seen such regeneration in his life, that it was a unique case. Agatha looked at the prisoner's handsome face, and a fantasy flashed through her mind. How he might look if his brown hair grew to such a length that the mane covered his head in a curly wave. How he might look in a stylish, expensive suit. A dream man. You go to the ends of the earth for one. But Agatha realized that no dream man would ever take her to the ends of the earth, because she wasn't like that. Agatha couldn't say exactly what was wrong with her, just everything. Appearance, the most mediocre figure, of course, nothing, but a sedentary job and not the healthiest diet already make hints of future overweight. Education not brilliant, hobbies, knowledge. She didn't consider herself stupid, but she wouldn't call herself smart either. And that made her angry, because that's not how things were supposed to work out. The bitter imprint of the past made the woman think the worst of herself. Agatha was convinced that maybe there was something weak and foolish about her that attracted the one who broke her heart, and she swore to herself that it wouldn't happen again. But with this handsome man, there was a story. She was about to take full advantage of her position. Threats and blackmailed if she found a weakness. Temptation, after all, she is a woman. But he was like an iceberg. She touched him, hugged him a little, and once he gave her a kiss, playfully, when she got too close. For that, she whipped her palm across his face and snickered that he was hitting on her. He didn't deny it, but when they met again, he gave her a look that kept her up at night. Here we go again. You should tell your man not to give her that disgusting perfume. What did you say? I snapped her out of her musings, and she clenched her palm, now digging her nails into his shoulder. Doesn't the scent suit you? Or are you to judge what suits me? I burst into flames. No one knew if he had someone there, a man of mystery. I mean, I sort of found out that he had some family there. Far away, but that was it. One day she happened to talk to one of the guards, who became not that a friend, but an acquaintance, with whom it was possible to calmly and even entertainingly exchange a few words. And so he told me that he had once heard a wolf growl right in the zone. It was in the yard where the prisoners were walking. He went to the strange sound and found that 3 men stood near him and looked at him fearfully. And he looked back at them and his eyes were not good, as if they were not human at all. He smiles at them, but like he's grinning. And then suddenly his expression changed back. Bullshit, Agatha shrugged. The story made her feel uncomfortable. Yeah, I'm telling you, that was before you were here. What do you think? I don't like him. Do you accept him? I took the Hippocratic oath. He's a human being too, and if I have to, I'll give him let go. Yeah, he hummed. And now Agatha stood before the one who had robbed her of her peace and didn't know what to do. Why aren't you paying attention to me? Joe's eyebrow arched, lips trembling in a ready grin. I seem to be answering all the questions accurately, doctor, and following the advice given. You are an idiot. You've been here a long time, and I'm a woman. A single woman. Her arms have already reached up to wrap around his muscular shoulders. She pressed her luscious breasts against me. Beneath the robe, a blouse with a deep neckline to show the lace of her lingerie. The epitome of seduction. But he hit me like a shot. You are not looking for fun, but for salvation. Agatha caught the air with her mouth. How dare you? You do. Am I wrong? Every time I'm here and not bleeding, you want me to give you a moment that will turn your world upside down, that you'll remember forever. And you know, you're not such a bad person. I know you do something for others. There's a light left in you. Shut up, she whispered and pulled away, turned away, wrapped her robe tighter and walked to the desk. There was a rustle of papers. How's the shoulder? The doctor's dry, businesslike tone, inquiring about the patient's health. In the meantime, Joe's return to his cell had been impatiently awaited. One man, Mark, came from a small village with only 5 residential yards left and had taken a crooked path. He committed his first theft at 12. Home was a mess. Mother and stepfather were drinking, nothing to eat. Then he was just scolded for a long time. He got so much trouble at home that he thought he wouldn't survive. After 4 years he did it again, but not for bread with canned goods, chocolate and macaroni he went, but for money to the cash register in the forest. He was lucky that he didn't have time to take it, and suddenly the shopkeeper himself stopped by. He knew what a difficult situation the boy was in at home. His mother and stepfather had been on such a bender that they were practically invalids. They didn't work a day. The shopkeeper took pity on the boy and gave him a job to help carry boxes and clean. The boy was nicknamed Kulik at home because of his injuries. His left hand was always bent, his fingers were crooked, so someone thought of a sandpiper who waited for a foot and hopped. The nickname stuck. The guy did not remember exactly how mangled, only a strange picture of trembling rose from early childhood, like dabbled at home in something fell pinned. Mark worked at the store until he came of age, and then went to the big city. He just found an ad at the bus stop and went, but almost got into a workhouse. Mark spent the night at the train station until some guy noticed him. He fed him, talked about life, and offered a job from which you can rise. I stole the first 5 cars as ordered. My head was dizzy with easy money. I was caught on 6 when the verdict was announced. If I could do that, I could turn back time. It was too late to think about how wrong he was. Once in the zone, Mark thought for the second time he wouldn't make it. But then Joe's defense attorney suddenly showed up. He just scattered Mark's offenders as they approached and told them not to touch him anymore. "Well, you're lost," quietly and pitifully even said Grandpa Jim, a man on the verge of retirement age and a recidivist with a record of 1/3 of a century. "You've got the wrong people on your ass." "What?" Mark was already happy, thanked his grandmother for interceding in his fate, and then he was shocked. "I'm telling you, he's not human. Jim didn't say a word in a day. It's no big deal." And then he opened up. "You think they're staying away from him for nothing?" "No, it's not for nothing. It's just the way it is." "You've got something to say, grandfather." "I have nothing to say. Only I didn't see you for good, you damned wolf." And after that, Jim was even more silent than before. That evening, when Joe was taken to the doctor's office, Mark was sour, for it was nearing the time when his advocate and protector would be released. It wouldn't be long before Mark's will was waiting. What would he do then? Would Joe be supported there in the big world, or would he forget the semblance of friendship that had arisen between them? Mark somehow did not dare to ask. All he got out was that he had a big family. Interesting, friendly, and Joe didn't seem to scold them. Mark didn't dare to ask something that had been on his mind for a long time. Could it be possible there, on the outside, not to forget each other, to help each other in a brotherly way? There was something else that frightened him, not that he seemed to see the back of his head, that he could read people's moods, that he was terribly strong. And this whole thing about what he did. He was captured in an antique salon. He broke into it at night, destroyed many works of art, and not just like that, but burned them. They said there was something ritualistic about it, something dark, medieval. The whole story made you wonder who was Joe? Was he a normal person or psycho? But Mark chose to live with it for now and be grateful for the support. The creak of the door brought him out of his musings. Mark looked up. Joe looked silently at the camera and walked through, sat on the floor with his legs folded as always, as if in meditation. Didn't say anything about the meeting with the doctor. But after about an hour or so there was silence. Suddenly he turned and looked straight into his eyes. "Don't be afraid of what's to come." And something flashed in his eyes that made Mark stop being afraid. And he realized that once fate had brought him and Joe together, there was no turning back. A couple of weeks passed, and all that time Agatha fought desperately, as if she had a severe flu, with uncomplicated thoughts about the beautiful tongue, which instead of becoming her instrument of pleasure, had become a personal curse. One day, to clear her head from going through papers, making reports on bandages and the like, Agatha went out of the infirmary into the street. Finding herself in the fresh air, she inhaled a full breath. The weather was fine. Suddenly she felt threatened. Someone said that working in such a place develops intuition, and here it was. She gave me a hint, made me tense up, even though you don't know where the threat is coming from. "Agatha, hurry!" From the corner of the building ran out of the guard, the same one who told the acquaintance about the growling that happened in the exercise yard. He waved his hand. "One bad, in a seizure beats. I'm afraid to touch. Maybe epilepsy. I'm coming." In a few minutes I returned, grabbed my suitcase, and rushed off. The traditional place for prisoners to walk was bustling with activity. Huddled together in a pile under the watchful gaze of the guards, and one was squirming on the ground with a groan and twisting in a strange fit. Agatha crouched down. It was a convict nicknamed Bean. His reputation was disgusting. He had served his sentence not the first time and was increasingly maligned. He was the only one who was contemptuous of Joe and hadn't blurted out that he'd teach him a lesson one day. Only Agatha saw exclusively the patient now. Gently she turned his head to the side. "Sure, it's all right. Can you talk? We need to get him to the infirmary." But suddenly the patient fell silent, and the next moment Agatha screamed, feeling herself grabbed, dragged to her feet, and something sharp jabbed into her side. "Hands off, let go," shouted the guard who had brought the doctor, realizing what had happened. There was a commotion on the other side of the courtyard. It was something unexpected and unthinkable. What were they expecting? "She's a hostage," Bim smirked, giving Agatha rotten breath from behind his dark teeth. "He thinks they're going to let him go like this?" asked Mark quietly, but he didn't get an answer as he expected. What a fool. But that's not what someone thought. Bim and 4 other convicts had devised a daring plan and intended to carry it out at any cost. The next moment there was commotion, shouting, noise, guards trying to calm the prisoners. Bean shouted a demand, the men scurried about, and at one moment a small group of Zeks, the very ones in Bean's gang, were very close to their leader, but they did not notice Joe touching them. The Zeks did notice him when he threw the last of them down in one motion, so much so that he grabbed his arm and couldn't get up. "I recommend you let the doctor go and voluntarily surrender to the guards. Your discretion will be rewarded," Joe said. All eyes turned toward him. "Get out of here," said one of the prisoners. The guards called for reinforcements and surrounded the rioters. It was more difficult to approach Bim. The doctor could be heard at any moment. "That's it, you're finished," shouted Bean. "Finish him off." The convicts swarmed on one of them. What happened next could not be called an ordinary fight. Agatha had seen something like it only in martial arts movies, and it lasted only minutes. Joe moved fantastically, lightly and smoothly, as if in a dance, but so swiftly that his opponents fell one by one. You! The enraged Boer let go of Agatha. His plan had been disrupted, and he intended to get even. Now that the woman was free, the guards swarmed toward the convicts. But Beam still had time to jump up to Joe. He wanted to hit him, and for good, but he just grabbed him by the throat and lifted him off the ground. Beam wasn't afraid of the law or the devil. I looked into his eyes. They were gray, but they looked yellow in the sun. Not evil, no, but as a beast might look. And then Ben was scared for the first time in his life. "Ask the doctor for forgiveness." I'm sorry, he whimpered, clinging to Joe's arm. "Don't hurt him, please." Joe let him go, or rather a man weighing under a pound. Joe, seeming to exert no more effort than a piece of cardboard, simply tossed him aside, and it was over. Joe wasn't even out of breath. "You were all right," he tossed to Agatha, who had barely gotten up with the help of her familiar guard and was sobbing. "Now you owe me one wish, and you owe me one wish," agreed. He said mundanely, as if the defeated convicts were not lying nearby, as if they were not here at all. Agatha flapped her eyelashes, completely losing the essence of what was happening, but her lips opened as if by themselves, and she said, thinking in parallel about what she was doing, madness. "I agree. What do you want? Tell me why you're so mean." The convicts pushed to the other side of the yard and watched this finale with amazement and admiration for his power. How he did it? Naturally, there was a great trial with what Bean had prepared. The head of the colony was a strict man, but he summoned him to him and thanked him. And all the inmates talked for a long time about how it was that Bean was the one they all hated. Joe wasn't just shunned, but to Bim many had serious claims, and all his henchmen, who created a game even by the standards of experienced sitters, scattered, and doctor, as rumor had it that she often called him not then to treat, and he her as ashamed took her to respect him. For such a joke, Mark after this case even became a little proud, because he was considered as the nearest person to his unloved one, and he showed himself in an unexpected way. A few more weeks passed, and the day came when he was supposed to be set free. It happened on a clear day when the sun shone so brightly that the air seemed to take on color. Agatha sat at her desk in her office, mindlessly poring over papers. She just needed something to occupy herself, not to look at the clock, not to think that a mysterious, insufferable, and at the same time attractive man was about to be on the loose. Where will he go? Is there a woman there who will throw herself on his neck? Who will set the table for him in the evening with a hot dinner? And then, fool, summed up her reflections, doctor, and reminded herself that in the case of Joe, no chance was not initially, because it is well known what ends the history of relationships with such like him, convicts. Their words and promises are lies. When Agatha finally decided to look at her watch, it was all over. Joe had already left the walls of the penal colony. He was free. But there was something else that troubled Agatha, and a lot more than Joe leaving. She realized that what had happened would not let her go, would come back as nightmares. When she saw glimpses of convicts, out of the corner of her eye, she saw Bim in everyone's face. At first, she wrote it off to the effects of stress, but it didn't get any easier. It was hard to concentrate on work. Agatha fell down in the evening without energy. Any food made her sick. Everything in the office was irritating. Then one day she decided to quit. She had some savings, but it would be enough to get by for a while. Rent an apartment, the cheapest, look for a place. If she wasn't lucky at all, she could go back to her parents in her hometown. They seemed to be convinced that her daughter had grown up to be an independent, serious person, and were not against taking her back, especially since age was making itself felt and they could use some help. Agatha told them nothing about what had happened to her, that first incident of unhappy and dangerous love for Sam. She didn't want to hear that she was a fool and it was her own fault. Soon Agatha left her position as a doctor in the colony and found herself in the city that had given and taken away her greatest hopes. But somehow she was lucky enough to find an apartment rented by an old woman who had moved in with her daughter. Agatha counted the money, enough for 2 or 3 months, and started looking for a job. One day Agatha was coming home from another interview and was approaching the entrance. "Agatha, please wait." Suddenly a girl's voice sounded behind her. Turning around, the woman saw a stranger hurrying towards her. She was tall and slender. Long legs and pink sneakers flashed from under a scarlet sundress like the feet of a heron. She was young. Blonde, stunningly long, below the hips hair flowed golden red waves, with each hurried checker chalk. Phew, barely caught up. "I'm sorry," she stopped, bowed sharply, placing her palms in her knees. "Who are you?" asked Agatha, confused. "Do I know you?" "No, but I know you well, and I told you a lot about you." The stranger smiled so sincerely, warmly, that it gave a cozy tingle in the heart, as if there was a person in front of you, with whom you could develop a strong and reliable friendship. But the mention of a name prevented this impression from blossoming. "Joe who?" I frowned. What a day this was. Not that Joe. "You were his doctor," the girl smiled again. But Agatha, as a defensive wall within herself, shot up from that smile. "I purely physically cannot remember all my patients. Some of them, I'm sorry to say, I'd like to forget them like a bad dream." "What's going on with this Joe of yours? Any complications? Problems? If that's the case, he better see the doctor he's seeing at the moment." "Who are you anyway?" "Oh." The girl accelerated, finally clasped her palms, the map, and flashed her eyes, hiding another smile. "Did you think I was his girlfriend?" "No, Joe's my big brother." It was only then that Agatha realized that the girl shared the same eyes with her brother. Gray like a stormy sky, like they were speckled with amber. Only his eyes were dusky, threatened by half-buried pain. This young beauty has an open, pure look, beaming as if clouds, through which the sun beams and spring rain is about to splash. "But I don't work anywhere as a doctor now. I don't see how I can." "You can." The strange girl splashed her hands. She was so agile in general that it seemed she couldn't stand still for a minute. "Only you can. Let's talk. My name is Mai. I'm not asking for a visit. That would be rude, but it's a long story. It's not really convenient outdoors. Why don't we go to a cafe? Take your pick, whatever you like." "My treat." Agatha shook her head. "Let's just say I can pay for a cup of coffee." "I'm not offended," she added hastily, and when the joy slid off May's face for a moment, she smiled again. "It's just that it's all strange. You show up, you say something about Joe. All right," I sighed. thinking that I was tired of standing like this after being in the city all day. Come on, there's a pancake house nearby, okay? I love pancakes. Abitha used to go to this pancake house herself. It was decorated in style. Even the waitresses wore sundresses. And mushrooms, too. The golden-haired girl finished listing the order. Agatha doubted very much that two people could handle what she had ordered. May, by the way, had insisted that she was the one to serve the pancakes, and the tea was paid for by a new acquaintance. She assured me that otherwise she'd be offended. It's not customary for them, a man occupied with conversation and not treated. Who established such strange customs, Agatha did not ask, and already her head was spinning. So, let's get on with it. What happened to Joe and why did you come to me? Is he sick? May, who had eaten the first couple of pancakes, sighed and bowed her head. Actually, Joe's as healthy as ever, but he's in danger because of me. You see, they want to marry me off, and he wants to stop it. How old are you? May, how about you? Shyly asked the girl, and it was impossible to refuse her. Okay, how old are you? May, 18. It's father-son's birthday. And you're getting married? Do you want to do it yourself? I asked cautiously. The mention of some deity, obviously pagan, made me wary. No, I don't want to be the wife of an old man. Agatha choked. May, I'm sorry, what faith? The one that is dead and alive forever. She lowered her eyes, answering as if she'd been taught. The one that came from the forest with the beasts and brought salvation to the lost. It's a great sin to dedicate a stranger, but heaven forgive me. She put her hand to her mouth, bit her little finger and began her story. It turned out that May and Joe were the only children of the head of the Wolf clan. To be more precise, it was a family with an ancient and rich history, and they believed they were descended from a werewolf. There were several other such families, only they believed they were not descended from a werewolf, a wolf, but from other wizards who could pretend to be other beasts, foxes and martens, lynxes and bears. All these families lived in a mansion, worked hard, and stayed away from the cities. They did not invite those who came to work for them, but they did not persecute those who came to increase their wealth. They didn't force people to believe in their own, but if they agreed to honor their ancestors, that is, the beasts of the werewolves, they had serious obligations. And so May wished to take a neighbor as a wife. He was an old neighbor, but he had something favorable to offer the father of the maidens, and they agreed. Agatha listened and didn't understand how such nonsense could be going on in the modern world, with other clans named after beasts. May, I'm sorry, but you seem to be living in a cult, she answered honestly and looked at the pancake on her plate without appetite. Strawberries and cream were my favorite, but I couldn't get it down my throat. I understand that, the girl said unexpectedly, but that's the way I was brought up. Do you live in the middle of nowhere? Like we used to. We don't live in cities, but in villages. Sometimes she leaves. Some people decide whether to live in the village or move to the city. In general, 100 years ago everything was much stricter, and today many people have forgotten their customs. But my father doesn't want to. We live near Colorado. Colorado? Agatha shook her head. She remembered that she had an acquaintance from there. Yes, my father wanted to send me to university to study to be a teacher, to teach our local children, but I want to be a teacher. Not for the clan, but for ordinary village children. My mother was a scholar. May reached for the sugar bowl and put a cube in her mouth. Only her second wife, and that was a long time ago, gone in childbirth. But Sarah, my brother's mom, raised me like her own. I decided to study in this city. I submitted my documents, and my father demands that I return and get married, and my husband won't let me. I can't study, I can't work. Well, you're all sorted out. But what about Joe? By the way, exclaimed so that they turned to them neighboring tables. What happened anyway? All I know is he trashed the antiquities store. May reached for another clay, but changed her mind and told about Joe. Turns out the wolves had a visitor in the house one day, a distant relative. A distant relative had come and taken away a lot of valuable things without asking. That is, stolen them. They found out that he decided to sell it to rich collectors. We haggled to get it back. His father, the head of the clan, had a heart attack. So Joe snapped out of it and drove into town. He decided to punish the offender, but he escaped earlier, so Joe only destroyed everything in the saloon. An ancient ritual to make the spirits forgive. His father was angry at his son for doing such a thing, because he asked him not to do anything in the heat of the moment. Joe apologized and even asked him not to visit him in the zone, not to further embarrass his family. May, no offense, but you say things I don't know if I believe. I don't believe in spirits, the girl said seriously. I only tell you how we see it. What about Joe? Does he believe in all that? Werewolves? Spirits? He's hesitating. He doesn't want to let everyone down. Our clan. Oh, I shouldn't say that. I'd be a renegade. The clan's losing its power. It's losing its power. My father would like Joe to be in charge, but he's been procrastinating. May, you're confusing me. All right, let's get to the point. Why is Joe in danger and how can I help? Joe wants to stand up for me, say he's against marriage, but as a single man, he doesn't have a say. He needs a wife, then his vote will be accepted and I won't be married. Agatha looked at the girl. She was young and beautiful, her eyes were huge, her freckles were scattered. Agatha wanted to laugh and scream at the same time because she understood very little. And what she understood was such a wild picture, and where would he get a wife? Can you marry him? Joe? Holes from the Wolf clan. For a few minutes they looked at each other in silence. The girl? Agatha raised her hand, waved at the passing waitress. The bill, please, and turned back to May. It was delicious, it was interesting. But no, I'm sorry, sweetheart. You have somewhere else to turn with all this, with being forced to marry, having no right. Joe, that one. I don't mean to offend you, but he's an idiot. To ruin his life and ruin mine too, huh? To get married? Yeah, how is that even possible? No, according to your usual rules, you have to get married, the girl said pitifully and sniffled. It was clear that she was about to cry. In our custom, it is not even the bride's wife will be announced, only for a day or two. Then you can say that you don't like the way we live and that you changed your mind about getting married. We don't judge that kind of thing. Well, the bride looked at the bride and changed her mind. It happens. And that old man, he won't ask me to marry him a second time. Nobody does that. Please help me, or Joe will die. Agatha, who had already managed to pay the bill for herself, while May was preparing another speech, froze, started to get up from the sofa, and sank back down. Will you stay with us again? There was a waitress nearby. Apparently, I'll have to. I'll have another coffee black, please. When the waitress left, Agatha reached for May, who had clenched her fingers so tightly around the cup of tea, she was afraid it would crack. Soothingly, he touched the girl's hand. Don't cry. And just if you can, quickly and simply tell me why Joe might be dead and why you can't find him another wife instead of me. Who? You know, we didn't get along much while he was there. And I told you once myself, stranger, not of your kind, tried. So how can I be for him? It turned out that if Joe had opposed his sister's marriage without a full voice in the clan, he would have had to go out for a ritual fight with the groom to have the power to forbid the action. A decrepit grandfather. Agatha marveled. I've seen what Joe can do. He's an old man, as you say, 100 years old. No, my fiancé has the right to field a fighter in any fight in his place to defend the honor of the clan. And even 3 if they go against an unmarried man. And his grandsons are mighty, Joe can't stand up to them. So, putting her elbows on the table, Agatha rubbed her temples. Her head was full of some fabulous, obviously abnormal information and ached. And another option, you just run, money, passports taken and go. If you have money, as you say, that rich clan, you can even go to the other side of the world. Daddy won't survive it. And Mama Sarah, I can't run away, neither of us, neither of me. I don't want to run away. I love mine, but I can't talk about it. Nonsense, horror, cult. What am I in for? May went on to talk about why she thought Agatha would be the best wife for Joe. All of her usual female acquaintances who might agree would do so wholeheartedly, because Joe was an enviable groom, and he himself was unwilling to commit himself to the bonds of marriage. Agatha, on the other hand, as May hoped, would agree simply to play the part of the bride, without claiming the fellow for real. I believe quickly. No, don't smile at me like that. Except I haven't said yes yet. I put my hands out in a protective gesture. When May almost glowered at the almost wrenched consent, it also turned out that the clan would accept Agatha because she was a kind person who took pity on a caged animal. Agatha was also a doctor, and such people were respected and highly valued by all clans. The conversation flowed on and on. Soon the pancake house would be closed to the public. Agatha thoughtfully tapped her fingers on the tabletop. Andre, Suppose, just suppose, that I would agree to this madness. Suppose even if I had free time on vacation, you'd be allowed to be a bride. You've really been good to him. Oh. Agatha felt herself blushing because her kindness was peculiar. Joe had probably spared his sister, and how you distorted, softened your stay in the zone. You were embarrassed, she praised. That's true, May added very offhandedly and nodded hurriedly. Help. It was the craziest night of Agatha's life. Soon the waitress said in an embarrassed voice that the establishment was closing to the public. I need to think, May. Do you have a phone? Well, I don't live in the woods. The girl smiled and twirled the smartphone of her purse in her hands. Oh, here are our photos with my brother, even children's photos. Do you want to see? Not now, so May, we have some time. Maybe we can meet again. Let's say the day after tomorrow. Yeah, sure. They exchanged phone numbers, said goodbye, and to her own morning surprise, Agatha slept better than ever that night. The next day she planned to go to the mall, but instead she dialed Tony's number right after breakfast. Hello, how are you? I'm out in the country helping my mother. Yeah, potatoes don't dig themselves, for Christ's sake, I quit my job. At home, I've got a lot of problems. My mother's worse, I have to fix everything. It's bad luck for you. I'm sorry. You probably don't care about me at all. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Why? I'm always happy to talk to you. It's nice here in the village, you know. Not like in the city. Fresh air, a river, berries again. Mother's just not getting any younger. It's a bit hard to manage alone. But nothing, we'll get by somehow. How are you doing? That's why I'm calling. I need your advice. Something wrong? That's one way to put it, but it's a story of debt. When can I call you back? Let me take care of the potatoes and other things. Yeah. So, I'll call you tonight around 8 o'clock. Is that okay? Great, I'm waiting. I went to the mall, bought a new set of linens, a cute mug with a purple hippo with a bouquet of daisies in it, and an assortment of candy too. When she got home, Agatha took a bath and settled down in front of the TV. She didn't feel like standing at the stove, so for dinner, aka lunch, she had stuffed cabbage from the cookhouse ready, but she had no time to immerse herself in the picture of love. As the phone rang, now you're free, tell me what happened. And Agatha told everything without secrecy. Tony listened attentively, didn't interrupt. You know, all this is very serious. His friend's voice sounded tense. Ideally, it would be better to forget about this story, not to answer May's calls, lock the doors and sprinkle salt on the threshold. Tony, what are you talking about? I know. You're lucky to have adventures. Listen to me, I'll teach you how to pass. Animal clans have been known in our village for a long time. Well, as known at the level of stories. Some old people believe in them. Young people, of course, consider them fairy tales. And you don't think so? I personally think it's, if you like, a kind of extended family. Sort of like they were in the Middle Ages. They're noble families, but they know each other primarily by faith. They're a strange sect. How can I tell you? It's not at all crazy. They don't recruit anyone. They don't take away people's apartments. The family is slowly going crazy, but they have the right to live as they wish. Yes, as I know, they raise their children decently up to the age of consciousness. They don't fill their heads too much. Then it depends on the kind of person. If he has the character and views of their breed, they take care of him. If not, if he wants to leave, they let him go. But it's common if they're simple. And those at the top, they are more tightly bound by all sorts of obligations. It's all very murky. No, ours, of course, work from villages and hamlets. They have a job, but somehow they get paid and keep silent. Maybe they have a confidentiality agreement, I don't know. They told me so much about these wolves and other zoo. You think I should just say no? You'd be involved in deceiving the head of the clan, which, I'm sorry, could have repercussions. They're peaceful, they're just uncommunicative. They don't talk to the locals much. It's not just Colorado, there's villages around here. It's just that they tend to recruit more from there. So maybe the people there know more. Tommy, you explain to me how these clans can exist under the animal minds. And these are such brutal traditions, you know. They're just sitting in the middle of nowhere, sitting quietly. They buy money, that means those who have stronger family morals, those who move to the city for their interests. But these are few in general, as I know, they still believe in this mysticism strongly. So they have loud animal names and amulets not only for this entourage. Tony, you're quite the encyclopedia, aren't you? Yeah. And for you, knowledge is not a pity to share. Aside from the other side, it's just that my great-grandfather was a hunter and was very interested in all this. I read books from him. By the way, that's an idea. We should look in the town library. What are we looking for? The works of a scientist. His last name's kind of weird. Well, actually a pseudonym. I think he lived in the 19th century, but his work is about fairy tales and history. Legend of Our Places. They were reprinted in the 50s. Go and read it. It's very interesting. I'd love to read it, but what am I going to do with May? So, after what I said, she didn't change her mind. Yeah. Avitha, don't take any chances. I can see why you're in over your head. I don't know why you decided to help him. But, Agatha, think about it, it's not good. It's not good to deceive people, to meddle in someone else's family. In fact, I've saved May too. That's right too. So you've decided to go? I guess so. Oh shit, no offense. I'm just thinking of ways to help you. Books alone won't be enough. It's gonna take a long time to make a shifter amulet. Tony, Abatha exclaimed again and turned on the light in the room because it was getting dark outside the window and she was uncomfortable. I've got it. Something rumbled from Tony's side. A bucket dropped from the porch with the feed. Chickens, just a minute. Abatha waited patiently. Everything. Okay, what I'm saying is, I got an idea. Now that things are going so well, I'll go with you. We'll say I'm your brother-in-law, we'll make up a story, but we'll embellish the reality a little even for evil. You'll say you've known me for years, that I'm like a brother to you. The whole predatory clan will accept that with his bride came a man who was kind of responsible for her, instead of her own father, for example. The legend will pass, we'll be like undercover agents. Ha. We'll get away with it, and we'll be alive. Don't scare me, Tony. I may have an even better idea in mind, but I'm gonna need some time. You say it won't take long, just a couple days. Well, I'll leave my mother alone for a while. I'll ask my neighbor, who's a little younger, to come over more often, or we'll be done with your fiancé May. Oh, by the way, your Joe ain't no savage. He's a real gray wolf. Oh, Tony, the joke made Agatha smile. What'd I do without you? I wish you'd realized that a lot earlier. Well, let's not dredge up the past. Call your May and tell her I'll be here a couple days this week, so we'll all go to Colorado. And from there, wherever it takes us, the poor and the brave. Soon after this conversation, Agatha called May and said that she agreed to help, but on condition that her old, good, and trustworthy friend would go with her, because alone, I'm sorry, but it was a bit dangerous to go. May replied that, naturally, she didn't mind. Tony's assumption was confirmed. May was even glad that Agatha had a male chaperone in her entourage, even if not a relative. The next few days it took for a friend to pack up and arrive. Agatha busied herself with all the things she had previously planned. For the time of the forced vacation, she went through all the clothes, resolutely promising herself to throw out what was no longer the right size or completely worn out, rewatched her favorite miniseries Space Duke and Infinity Tiger. But still the past events did not allow me not to get into the taste of classes, not to relax. Therefore, although it was raining outside the window, Agatha, with the opposite of the weather sultry enthusiasm, gathered to meet Tony at the station. And no sooner had the man caught his breath after the crowd of passengers leading the train, than she flew up to him and even, which however, for herself was unexpected, hugged him. Oh, hello. Tony was confused by such a meeting, but weightlessly, fearfully so embraced in response, clapped him below the shoulder blades. You shouldn't be traveling in this weather. Sampo got there, uncomfortable, I threw up on you. Come on, it's nice in the village, but boring. And so we have an adventure. Wink the occasion, it means to peek at how the rich and famous live. Got lucky with transportation on the way to Agatha's apartment. Came up one by one. Not you could almost. The woman hurriedly put the tea on and put the cutlets and mashed potatoes on to warm. She herself would have sat down with pleasure on sandwiches, but Tony was miserable somehow and worked at the stove. Very tasty, he praised, taking a fourth cutlet for a refill. Even I don't know how to make a cutlet like that. Agatha shook her head, slicing the charlotte. No, really, it's delicious. Your husband will be lucky, he added quietly. Agatha shook her head. Oh, means it? It was all she could afford at home now. After a hearty dinner, over tea they talked a little about what was to come. Tony generously told me everything he knew. The book I brought with me, I found it at home. He went to the bag in the room. Here he plumped a weighty, suspiciously dilapidated-looking book on the tabletop. He gently unfolded it to the right page, and Agatha dove into the reading. It turned out that clans with beast names had come to these parts among the first settlers, and as soon as they came, they settled down firmly, solidly, because they were preparing not just to settle the uninhabited lands, but to organize their possessions, where they would be full masters. For centuries, they lived quietly or almost quietly. They don't write much here. I'm at the side, looking ahead. After the historical background came the heads, where the legends of the Kalans were set, accompanied by black and white illustrations of some obviously predatory beasts. I didn't want to watch such a thing at night. Thought it might be good for us to bring along. Do you think the hosts will mind? No, of course not. They're not gonna search our stuff. Just keep it out of sight. Tuck it in a bag under your stuff, in private. But it's late, we can go to bed. I'll sit up in the kitchen. There's nothing on the couch. Tony, there's no sofa. It's only for a kitten. I'll go in the kitchen, I'm the little one. And you on the bed. You think I'm going to feel normal after I get a woman out of bed? You think I'm going to feel normal? And don't argue, I'll take a nap. And tomorrow I'll sleep on the train. In the morning they woke up early and had breakfast without hurry. Agatha called May to make sure that everything was going as planned, and all the participants of the adventure went to the train station. It's nice to meet you. May smiled radiantly at Tony, giving him an unexpectedly strong handshake. At last they got into the compartment. Tony said that as a man would take the top shelf, May volunteered to sit on the other one. I like heights, she said, and began to rummage through her wicker bag. As soon as the train started, there was fried chicken, boiled eggs, smoked sausage, cheese, and some baked pies on the table. On Agatha and Tony's side, there were supplies too. Although there were clearly reasons to keep the others occupied, Tony was a little sad that he couldn't flaunt his Bavarian talents in front of Agatha, of course. But there just wasn't time to cook at this rate. Agatha had heard of the beauty of the Colorado countryside, but had no idea how much smaller they were than the reality she had discovered. Whether the summer was to blame or her mind, overwhelmed by the gray cityscape cube of life's turmoil. But it seemed to her that she hadn't seen anything more beautiful. The lush green landscape, where flowers blew lushly and tall grasses stood tall, opened outside the window of the bus on which the company had boarded after getting off the station where their train had stopped for the end. It's beautiful here. Agatha sighed. It is? Tony smiled. Summer is in full swing, but this is, and just the beginning. The most beautiful there, beyond the village, by the river. Such onions as spill in summer, so pure jungle, cows are lost. It's good in the forest too. By the way, there are no ticks, such a biological anomaly, but mushrooms and berries. Tony, it turns out, could not only cook well, be a friend who in difficulties does not abandon, but also to poor Nightingale. At last the bus stopped. We got out with our small luggage. Agatha looked around. How do we go from here? Whether we walk or hire a carriage? I have no idea. Hey, May, I've never been here before. Tony addressed May in such a familiar way that Agatha was alarmed, but the girl only smiled again in her own way and sent that they were to be met, and suddenly she jumped, waved her arms. A car appeared on the road, which at a closer look seemed to Agatha and Tony to be a runaway museum piece. They haven't made one of these in half a century, no less. Tony shook his head as an open-top car with a pale cream-colored body and cherry upholstery came to a stop. The driver was an old man, looking as ancient as the vehicle. Grandpa, hi. May threw herself on his neck. The vixen returned. He looked attentively at the companions of the master's daughter, as if X-rayed. Who are they? Our dear Joe and the bride. Agatha expected the game to start a little later. It's about time, guess, Grandpa said, not smiling, but friendly. May's marriage is scheduled for today. That means it should start already. What? What? The girl rounded her eyes. Without the bride to read the ceremony. I shrugged my shoulders. Your groom is not well, so they are in a hurry. They weren't expecting you, right? They thought they'd talk about it and send for you, so they get married faster. So that's how it is, yeah, May grumbled, taking the front passenger seat. Drive. That's allowed, Ren won at last, and lovingly stroked the dashboard, which it seemed was very well cared for. It was all gleaming. This is not a city, it is possible, if you judge by the sensations on the deserted, appeared through the field in Grove Road. The car scattered speed far over 100. Tony was delighted. He had never had a car of his own, but he had always wanted one and was partial to one. Agatha was uneasy, even if there were no other cars, even if there was a lot of space around. Grandpa slowed down when the car went over a big hill, and the view opened up in a way that made the townspeople gasp. Near the river, surrounded by a high wooden fence, as if an ancient city, stood a house, a real terem in 3 floors, looking from afar like a gingerbread house. There were brick buildings, but mostly wooden. Inside it looked not like a fair farm, but a whole farm. Not further than 200 meters from the house began the forest, stretching then, as far as the eye can see and closer to the horizon, rising in different hand waves, because there began the mountains, let them great but majestic, and all this view amazed, alarmed the unruly spirits of wild natural elements, beckoned with mystery. But now the car slid down the slope, and the forest turned smoothly into a dark green row of trees, where, it seemed, the sun did not penetrate. They approached one of the gates of the house. Agatha had counted 3 so far, and contrary to her expectations that dormant sectarians live here, Grandpa opened the gate with the help of a remote control pulled out of the glove compartment. "Here we go." "Hurry up." May tugged Agatha's arm out of the cabin. "Run? Where to?" "I'm getting married." Agatha looked confused. She understood May's fears. The groom had come to arrange the marriage, but she didn't think that the events would develop so quickly. "And Joe? I have to talk to him first." "No, you don't." May splashed her hands. "We'll tell him on the spot. But let's go." "It's obviously bad," Tony said, and clung to Agatha. "Come on, let's go help out." There was no time to say hello to the staff in the household. Under their puzzled glances, so ordinary, polite May breathed into the small wing of the house on the left, which was a separate building connected to the main one by a covered gallery. Here the members of her family gathered for serious house councils and such like events as were going on today. May swung the doors open with such force that they nearly flew off their hinges, bursting in with a golden amber whirlwind. Following her, light poured into the darkness, with only a small, stone-built fire in the center of the room glowing. "I'm against it," she exhaled angrily and pointed a finger at the man sitting there. "My brother is also against it, which means you can't make him gay." Joe sat on the low pew next to Father Steve. The man with the long, graying beard was as stout and powerful as a century-old oak tree. Before his daughter's intrusion, he too had sat with his hands on his knees, conversing with May's fiancé. And this man, on Agatha's first impression, one could at least theater a tale about an evil wizard right now. This old man with the long snow-white beard and the same long hair was dressed in loose pants and a shirt, all black, thickly embroidered with silver and multicolored threads. A large floral ornament changed. He rose as the uninvited to the council invaded, leaning on a carved staff with a scarlet crystal at the tip. May's father and Joe, on the other hand, were dressed quite modern. Plain pants, one had a shirt, the other a blue t-shirt. "May, daughter, why do you dishonor your father?" asked Steve, spreading his hands. "Your brother doesn't mind talking, you know. Why are you acting like this? Are you out of your mind?" "Don't scold the girl, it's from youth," grinned the 100-year-old groom, stroking his beard. "It's nothing, she'll get wiser when she's a wife." May grimaced as if she'd eaten a lemon, but she pulled herself together again. "Joe has a voice against it, because he has a fiancée. He's ready to get married now." Agatha, who had been standing on the sidelines, finally decided to enter so that everyone could see her. "Good afternoon." She smiled, strained, and thought that she had forgotten to specify about customs. Maybe she should greet her fiancé in a special way. "So I've come to see you, Joe, my love." When she finished, it sent shivers down my spine. Agatha felt as if anyone could recognize a lie in her words. "What?" Steve exclaimed. "Joe, when did you get here? Who is she? And you, like May, are going against your father?" "Papa." May practically pushed the ready room. "I was the one who decided. I rushed them." Joe just didn't know how to say it. Her name's Agatha. She treated him, met him with a kind heart when he was a prisoner. And then he was a river stone. But he was guessing his future wife, and he recognized her. He asked me to find her and bring her to him. She had been in love with him for a long time. Steve looked at the stranger incredulously. Not young, city girl. Probably divorced too. Who's that with you? I've never been married. Agatha stuck her chin out proudly. Yes, I'm a city girl, but I come from a decent family. Yes, I'm a modern woman, and I've been in relationships before. But when I met him, I realized what love at first sight was, but I had to let him go. He said he had a commitment to his family, but that was fate's way of doing things. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Tony watching the performance admiringly and sorely at the same time, and I realized I couldn't forget him. So when May came to me, I didn't hesitate to say yes. The man next to me was a friend of mine of old. He volunteered to accompany me on my journey. His name is Tony. I'm ready to be your wife, Joe. Hello, and I'm sorry to barge in on you like this. May was hurrying us along, Tony said. Hurry what for? Steve frowned. And if they're going to get married, why shouldn't my brother have a say in the matter? Agatha wasn't a master of reading other people's emotions, but she could have sworn the last thing Joe wanted to do right now was recognize her as his fiancée. But he rose, stepped toward her. Hello, bride. Forgive me, father. I'm only doing what my heart tells me to do and what the prophecy says. If the wolves no longer respect the ancient law, if they do things that make me ashamed to drive, then perhaps my great-grandfather left the forest in vain. I'm sorry if I've offended you. Then you and I are no more kin. You'll never see me in your house again. I swear by the sky, by the moon, by my sister. He turned around at the door, where everyone had parted in front of him. And you can forget about my plantations in Cyprus, too. For a few minutes after he left, everyone was silent. Thanks, kids, Steve sighed. He looked downcast, and Agatha felt bad about what they'd gotten themselves into. Taking care of their old man, shaming them. What can I say to you? Live as you please, and it will all go to dust. That's how I know. Having said what I wanted to the offspring, I turned to the townspeople. As the owner of the house and the head of the Wolf family, I welcome you and invite you to feel as if it were your home too. Accept food and nourishment here. Stay the night and spend the day. Turn to his again. Well, since you have decided on the seniority, you should fulfill the duties of the head of the family yourself. At least my mother can't see me. Steve's gone. I think we'd better go into the house and talk it over, said Joe, and Agatha, though she was glad to see him, would have liked to go under the ground to avoid the conversation. As they walked across the yard, towards the main part of the house, they ran as recently as she could get a better look at everything. The surroundings were clean and one could see people busy with many things, which was probably mandatory in such a huge household. Someone was fixing tools, maybe for mowing. At a long table under an awning, women were picking mushrooms. A flock of geese walked by, driven by a boy with headphones in his ears. He was listening to music loudly. Most of the people we met were dressed quite modern. Is this all your family? Agatha asked. No, just distant relatives. It's more convenient to live together. Workers from neighboring villages rarely come, though they dress well. He glanced at Tony. Yeah, they come from Colorado too. I know a friend worked as a shepherd with you last year. Said it was all right. Personally, I don't mind. I mean, you live a strange, bizarre life. Don't take offense, he said softly. Joe didn't look at Agatha, and he even took Tony's side. He walked beside her. Father doesn't force anyone who doesn't want to take the faith of their ancestors. He doesn't. Just work properly. Don't do stupid things. Don't lie. Tony sighed at those words. If you want, leave. But if you leave for good, you won't get any property or support. And a lot of people leave, May added, because sometimes you can't live like that. I agree. He's overreacting, Joe said. Overreacting? They're not even. She exhaled, clearly trying to calm down. Medieval. Lucky they put the kids in regular school and didn't lock them up at home. And let them go to town when they grow up. Joe added about the rejected fiancé. He realizes times are changing, by the way. He dresses like he's going to a masquerade party. He's got a flock of wives. So, by the way, he's never forced anyone. Yeah? May got mad. 4 and 6 of them came to him, I know for a fact. But they decided for themselves that it's not the sieve or wealth that's nicer. What about me? He fell in love with you in his old age. You look like his first wife. You were a fox, too. He said they don't believe that you'll get along. I hate him. He even gives gifts to the spirit of the forest alone, He doesn't pull anyone else with him. What kind of gifts? Tony got suspicious. Colorful ribbons, pies. I'm not afraid, not of innocent maidens, he grinned. And anyway, you could have been gentler with him. He turned his attention back to his sister. Well, he'll be gone soon. What years? As his children will begin to divide the inheritance, all that he gained will be wasted. If he's so good, why did he bring up normal children? Abitha was tired of listening, so she decided to speak up. That's the way it is. So you feel sorry for this crazy man. Agatha was irritated at his behavior, but she was ready to vent her emotions on anyone. That's nothing to talk about. Come and get yourself settled. Joe pushed open the door to the house, and they walked into what looked like a hallway. Everything was wood, and the furniture was mostly wood. Sis, help the guests get settled in. Tell them how we're doing. He glared at his sister and left. There were many rooms in the house, but none were kept especially for guests or those who were late on business. They just put them in the best ones available. Tony and Agatha had been given door-to-door rooms that were bright, spacious, and decorated, pleasantly enough, with modern furniture and just a touch of antiques. Before leaving them to sort out their things and rest, May said that dinner for the family would be served at 9 and, of course, must be attended. But there wouldn't be much talking required. Thankfully, because the Wolf family had a strict rule about eating at the table and not talking. Agatha felt broken, depressed. Tony, on the other hand, was glowing with curiosity. If you want to see everything, go ahead. No one will bite. May waved her finger at him. I'll show you around. Can I see the kitchen? The man became bolder. Sure, but there's nothing to see. Here are the workshops. It's very interesting to me as a cook professional, you know. Tony pouted importantly, and May agreed with him with a laugh. When they left, Agatha showered in her bathroom, then changed into fresh clothes and decided to look for him on. She realized that she just couldn't take it all if she didn't talk to him thoroughly. Deciding that she would ask one of the locals where to find him, she left the room. Excuse me, do you know where to find Joe? She called out to a girl walking through the courtyard with a stack of ceramic plates. She didn't seem surprised by the stranger's presence. The girl nodded in the direction. Over there in the stable. She brushed her horse and went on. Abitha walked around one building where agricultural equipment was stored. The door was ajar. She saw a guy fiddling with the open hood of one of the tractors. A hoarse neighing was heard ahead, and Agatha found herself in front of a huge barn. She pushed open the small door of an elder near the wide gate and entered. In the warm twilight, a nearby horse merely nudged her with his muzzle as he reached for the stall. The conversation wouldn't have happened if there had been other workers here, but Joe was alone. Hello. He didn't answer anything. He was concentrating on brushing the sides of the Raven Stallion with a brush. Joe, I can explain. May just came in and said you needed to be rescued. She said you could die. I couldn't. Joe, talk to me. What? He turned abruptly, the brush falling to the floor, approached and loomed over her. The man had gotten better since his release, stronger and bigger. His hair had grown back, and Agatha could see that it looked good on him. I shouldn't have done that then. I was a fool, hitting on you, I admit, inhuman, cruel. No, you behaved as human nature sometimes dictates, I replied quietly. I'm not angry, and I don't blame you. You didn't press me to the end after all. The only thing I didn't like now was May being so rude to my father. If you or someone else had come, it wouldn't have made any difference. I could have talked to the neighbors, by the way. They might have gotten the old man to back off. Now I'm lying to my father too. You think that's a good thing after all that's happened? He shook his head, grinning. For my sister's sake, only for her sake I put up with all this. But you know, I understand you wanted to help. But sometimes help can be harmful, I know that. Agatha could feel the tears streaming down her face. She was about to turn around and run away, but Joe stopped her, caught her by the shoulders. Remember how it turned out I owed you? Remember my wish? That's what I want to get now. Tell me why you're like this. Yeah, you wanted to break and run first. Yeah, she came to Sakan and help May. She was driven by her own special feelings, and she didn't regret it one bit. But so blatantly, but as if another force was driving the woman besides thought. She only released herself from his grasp, took 2 steps, and sat down on a bale of hay. And she spoke. She did not conceal anything, but revealed her whole self, looked so far and deep into her thoughts and feelings, which had recently led her through life, that she became frightened. Joe listened in silence, then came closer and touched her shoulder in a different way. "It's good that you told me everything. It's better this way, believe me. I thought he wanted to say something else." And he spoke. He shared what he had kept silent for a long time, that his father raised him as the heir of the family, did not want to give, as was customary, the right to choose his own destiny. He found special mentors, sent him to the forest for a long time. It was there, in brutal training, that Joe acquired his scars. Agatha timidly asked about the tattoos, and he told her that his father had similar ones. It was the way men of their kind, who were believed to be direct descendants of the werewolf, marked themselves. A century ago, the inhabitants of such tattoos were very afraid of them, believed that they really could shapeshift or their spirit separating from the body, settle it in the beast and so hunt or revenge. It turned out that the training was tough, not only had to learn to fight, but also to learn the language of the beasts. You had to learn on your own skin how to survive in the forest without supplies and fire. They even had to learn how to growl in the animal way. Joe said he realized a long time ago that he disgraced himself, hurt his father by disobeying him when he came back from the zone. His father called him in for a talk, said he had no idea how to pass on the power of the legacy. It would be a disgrace to the whole family, but there was no way out. Dad only loved 2 women in his entire life. They were May and Joe. He never wanted any other children. "I've got to go," said Joe, finishing his story. "I'll be back for supper. You go wherever you want. Keep an eye out. I've told the right people about you. Don't worry, they won't hurt you anywhere." Agatha, however, left the stable in a hurry. She wasn't afraid of horses, but she didn't feel comfortable staying in this strange room. It was still sunny outside, even though it was getting late in the evening, but it was better than in the stable. The woman tried to put everything that had just happened between her and Joe out of her mind. She just wandered here and there, but as she passed the goat pen, she suddenly stopped. She thought she saw someone she recognized. "Mark," she called out to the guy who was feeding the animals. "Agatha." He dropped the bucket, which pleased the goat who rushed to him. He stood up, his eyes rounded. "What are you doing here?" "So I'm free, doctor, so I have rights as a free man." "It's clear you do." I waved my hand. "What are you doing here?" Agatha nodded, feeling a vicious sympathy for Joe. She wanted to find out more about him back in the zone, and that's why Mark had found out. She remembered that he was the only one close to him. "You work here?" "I'm not a shepherd, which means I've got a whole belly full of cattle, and they're going to send me back to school." The guy bent down for the bucket, and then Agatha realized what at first seemed so strange about the ex-convict. His arm, maimed long ago, now looked perfectly healthy. Mark, noticing the interest in his limb, was embarrassed and even hid it behind his back. "How is that? How is that possible?" Professional interest flared up in Agatha. "You where?" "Cured," Mark answered quietly but importantly. "Impossible. You can see that, just not city doctors, but here." "What do you mean?" "Well, they took me to a grandmother, and she slowly straightened me out." "Well, that's pretty slow. In the month I haven't seen you, it couldn't have happened." "Believe it or not, it did. It's just that she knows herbs and incantations and words and secrets. It's unscientific." "I'm sorry, I'm a free man and I thought I had the right to take a risk. Only if you need to treat something yourself. I warn you, she's a bad woman, she charges a lot, and they say she may not accept you. She'll say it's your destiny to be sick and won't accept you." "And it's not your destiny," Agatha grinned. "How much did he pay?" "Every own has his own price. She told me not to take a drop of alcohol in my mouth." Mark replied bluntly. "I'm sorry, Agatha, but I have cattle to feed." "Everything. Then I have to catch goats to mark their ears." "Work. I can't talk." Leaving the boy alone, Agatha decided to go back into the house and at the very porch ran into Tony, who looked unusually agitated. "Can you believe it? They've got real ovens here, the real ones, like they used to have when the Tsars were here. And the utensils are all old and working, frying, boiling. If we could have such a restaurant in my former restaurant, we'd be Paris." Agatha listened to Tony and couldn't believe her ears. "You said you were afraid of wolves and other animal clans." "I've been listening to gossip and not the smartest people. The people who work here are outsiders, and they pay well. Listen yourself. It turns out that according to the old faith and other paganism, the owner and his wife, his son, his daughter, and 20 other people are left here. It's more, as the legend already looks. They do it before the rite to keep the tradition alive. Kind of like we do in the cities. Halloween is idle. And the people who gossiped, they're the drunks. They were kicked out because they couldn't work and they stole property. Oh, I was a fool myself. My neighbor comes here every year where the passive begins. He helps me to check if the grain is good. He's a retired agronomist. He told me, I argued with him, that the sectarians were fooling him, but it turns out they were fooling him. As you know, sighed the woman, and these are the people I deceive. Tony darkened sharply. It's not good. Abitha did not have time to answer. Suddenly some girl with a bag in her hands rushed past them, followed by another. All were hurrying to the main part of the house. She tried to stop the third one. What's wrong? Stevie's not feeling well. He's got a heart attack. They sent for the herbalist. It's a long way from here. He lives old. Shall we call an ambulance? Abatha frowned. They would have called someone else, but Steve doesn't recognize it. That's all. You know. Abatha put her hands to her sides, professional indignation bubbling up inside her. Take me to him. The girl batted her eyelashes. I'm a doctor and his son's fiancée won't dare refuse my help, and turned to Tony. Please be careful. The master of the house and family lay in his upper rooms. Steve was not well, shivering as if from cold, as always felt strange if his heart ceased. He lay on his side and ordered all the blankets he could find to cover himself. That's nothing. He opened his eyes when Agatha came into the room. Go away. I'm a doctor and I can't stay away. Does it hurt? It's getting better. Let's lie down normally on the back, not on the left side, with the heart. What are you doing, girl? I've already sent for the witch doctor. I'm for her. Do not argue sick. She looked sternly, sighing. Steve lay down as instructed. Avitha pulled all the blankets off him, opened the window. It's stifling in here. You're a modern man, Steve. Any heart disease? I had a heart attack a long time ago. Where's your first aid kit? I don't recognize it. I'm sorry, but this is not how it's going to be today. I'm sorry. You could end up in the hospital. How will the farm be without you? You know how to talk. I snorted, but I didn't argue anymore. He sent a servant girl who looked into the room to get a first aid kit, then took some medicine for his heart. Agata wrote on a piece of paper what could be bought at the pharmacy without a prescription, and Steve, sighing again, said he would send a man to the pharmacy in the nearest village. I'm sorry I took it badly. It's all right, she replied and averted her eyes. You're worried about the children. Tack, at first I thought, urban, ordinary, but you're so worried about the old man. Maybe it's true what the stone on the river said. I won't interfere with your happiness. Agatha wanted to punch herself in the face, so she pretended to look at the colorful doormat. So, weddings, of course, are not a quick matter, but we can organize a rite of passage. We'll do it tonight. What? Agatha forgot how to breathe. Don't be frightened. It's not hard. It's not scary. We'll just gather the whole family, and some of our friends will come. We'll dress you up, sing praises to the spirit. And then we can leave the wedding without hurrying. You'll be almost like a wife, he winked. It used to be, if in the olden days they prepared for this rite for so long, they sewed the bride's shirt for 3 full moons. But times have changed, so let's hurry up, but with respect. Agatha found the strength not to give herself away in any way. She thanked Steve for the fact that he had agreed to treat her with more than just herbal remedies. She went out quietly, shut the door behind her. She calmly returned to her assigned room, and here she closed the door behind her and literally slid down the wall. What's going on? They had agreed only on a small deception, and now, in front of the whole family, to play the role of the bride? No, she can't go through with it. And let Joe fight 1,000 opponents, but excuse me, you have to think of yourself. It's the whole family coming out to lie to her face. Who does that make her? And all for who? For a convict. Even if he's crazy handsome, who could only talk and kissed her once. For a girl who's being married against her will. She found a stranger's aunt, pityingly, to throw the care on her shoulders, and she's a goat happy. No. Avitha wiped her tears and got up. She had had enough of this. The woman was about to go and find Tony and tell him that they were leaving urgently, and then to write or call Steve from the city when she felt better and explain everything. What a dumb thing to do, but she didn't have time because there was a knock at the door. And when she opened it, behind her stood a woman in her 40s, beautiful, curly-haired. "Hello, I'm Sarah, his mother." Her face was glowing with happiness. In her arms she carefully held some kind of a roll. Happiness, Luda's sister, into the house peeped, stepped into the room, followed by May, slipped in, averting her eyes. It was obvious that the girl was also shocked by the pace and direction of events. "I was afraid that my Joe would be a loner until he turned gray. He's stupid and I haven't. But I found the one who warmed his heart. Here's this for you." She dropped the package on the bed and unwrapped it, shook it, carefully unwrapping either a floor shirt or a dress. The long white cotton garment was embroidered with flowers at the collar, sleeves, and hem. Cornflowers, poppies, clovers, daisies, and many other field flowers seemed as if alive in the silk, and between them was a pattern of golden threads, embroidered animal footprints, which Agatha guessed were, of course, those of a wolf. "It's not Steve anymore, I've decided," Joe's mother said with a wink. "I wore this shirt when I was at the right, and my grandmother before me. Take it as a gift, honey, and call me Mama now." She hugged her bestly, tightly. Agatha felt that a little more her heart would stop, because now she did not know what to say. "Thank you. I don't even know how to thank you. This is so unexpected, right?" "Yeah, sure, but I need to talk to Tony. It's urgent." "Don't worry," Joe's mother smiled. "He already knows about it. He's getting ready too. Now you need to wash and comb your hair." Agatha was well aware that the situation of their little company of conspirators was getting worse by the moment. But a long time ago, Agatha was skiing down the mountain, and it so happened that she lost her poles and rolled down, realizing that she had to slow down, but not realizing how to do it. She was afraid of losing her balance and rolled down until she fell. And this case was something similar. It was possible to refuse help in such a personal matter as washing. But then Agatha was handled with great skill and precision. She was given a shirt, and when she was dressed under a sash or woven belt of many leather straps, silver ancient coins and colorful stones, and put into red shoes of soft leather, which seemed very much like the soft shoes once seen in a museum. The hair was left loose at the insistence of Joe's mother. Agatha removed her earrings and a simple pendant. She almost shuddered when she heard that her husband was already giving her new jewelry to his wife. He would go a month or two without them, and after the wedding night he would lavish them on her. Promising herself comfortingly that it would not come to that, Agatha finally went out, accompanied by her mother and a few other women. When the doors to the great hall opened, Agatha was almost blind for a moment, for there were so many candles, torches, and braziers everywhere. The ceremonial hall, her mother whispered in her ear. It hadn't been opened in a long time. The last time was May's 16th birthday. There were people sitting on benches along the walls, not many people, but their eyes were fixed on Agatha. A few young girls looked at her with frankly unkind eyes and cast warm and sad glances at Joe. Apparently, the handsome man was theoretically in demand here. But what was surprising to Agatha was that she wasn't jealous. She would have been more than happy to hand him over to one of them. "Take that brunette over there," wearing a wreath of cornflowers, her nose reddened from recent tears. The girl was being held by her shoulders and whispered to by an older man, probably her father. Steve stood in the center of the hall near a tall, powerful pillar covered with carvings. The top of it was like a grinning wolf's face. Below it, all the forest animals walked along the tree branches. It looked like some kind of artifact. An idol? Agatha didn't know, and she just wanted to believe it wasn't something sinister. At the foot of the pillar were stacked flowers, ears of grain, and fruit. Nothing meaty. That was good. Finally, Agatha decided to look directly at Joe. He was dressed almost like her, the same pattern on the white cloth, only the shirt was shorter, and there were pants. But Agatha didn't understand why Tony was also dressed the same way. Apparently, from the look on his face, realizing her confusion, his mother smiled at him and raised her hand, calling for silence. "Tonight is a great night. Our son and heir to the family will find a wife. First their souls will unite, and after the wedding, which we will soon play, they will have a family of their own. He will become a man. You don't know our customs yet, but here's what you need to know for today. This is your lover and your best friend. The latter could be a father, a brother, a nephew, any relative. The main thing is that not only the groom at the right was, but also another man, the essence of which is to be the patron, the protector of the girl until marriage. At this moment, until the light of the full moon touches the couple, that the groom, that the attendant as if equal. So we pay tribute to one fairy tale that the foremother of our family chose with whom she should stay, with a human or with a jack. Now go, vote to the bridegroom. Agatha felt as if she were treading on hot ground. She felt nauseous. She had to gather her strength and shout in front of everyone that it was all a hoax to save May and Joe. My chosen one, hold out your hand to me and accept the marriage bracelet, Joe said calmly and without feeling. The jewelry glittered on his open palm. Agatha forgot how to breathe and wished it would all just go away like a bad dream. If the real wolves had come here with a suggestion to go into the thicket, she would have run to them, squealing with happiness. Wait, can I say something? Tommy suddenly stepped forward. Don't get involved, Steve growled, but his wife shushed him, or rather growled, and he bowed his head. It's out of order. But you talk, she said to Tony. We're free to talk. What are you trying to say? I apologize. First of all, Tommy wiped his forehead. It was hot in the hall, despite the fact that part of the roof was missing. And secondly, I'm curious about this. I've read a little about your customs, but I'm asking for clarification, so to speak. Did I understand correctly that in this rite where we are now, me and Joe represent the two sides between which the bride must choose? So according to your customs, the bride could theoretically go not to the groom, but to the attendant, unless it's a close relative, of course. Is that right? True, really, it's never happened. Steve divorced his hands. I don't see why not. My great-great-grandmother did it, Sarah said. She was a mute. She got her secret fiancé to show up like that. But my Joe wouldn't do that. He learned what happens when you do things without thinking. Sarah, what are you talking about? Shut up. Steve frowned, but his wife withstood her husband's displeasure with a straight look, and he had to give in and back off again. Mom, what's wrong? Asked May, who had been standing quietly with the other girls, who were whispering among themselves like a flock of birds. Does everyone know what night it is? Sarah asked and looked around at the crowd. Night of reconciliation, came a voice from the far bench. That's right. Steve had rushed the ceremony to smooth over the fact that the hare's wife would be a stranger from out of town and not of the animal kind. But also on this night, it is supposed to open secrets, and everyone can count on the fact that he will be forgiven, that he will not be punished. This is how our ancestors and the wolves lived. The people quieted down, listened attentively, and nodded. One could already understand, though, Steve, as a man ruled over everything, the true and not less influence was also possessed by his wife. And here is the truth. It was revealed to me by this man. She threw forward her hand, pointing to Tony. Say what you've told me, and don't be afraid. Agatha stood with her mouth still open. I must apologize again, Tony said, coughing, and continued. I've always been a friend of Agatha's. We met when we were young, and I fell in love with her. But before I could admit it, it turned out I was just a good friend to her. And then she moved to another city, and we drifted apart. But then, well, that's a very personal story. I will only say that I came when she needed help, and I realized that I loved her. But I was afraid that if I confessed, she would not agree to friendship, because one man had hurt her, done a terrible thing, ruined her life. I didn't want her to think I only wanted one thing. And then the other day she called me, and it turns out she needs my help again. Tony finally gathered his thoughts, apparently, and summarized, coherently, quickly, everything they had in mind. Added several times that they meant no harm to anyone, didn't know it would go that far, and that he was a man with prejudices. And once he arrived and saw how things really were here, he realized he couldn't lie. He said he'd met Sarah while looking around and he'd opened up to her. And she said that now it would be better to apologize in front of everyone on a special night. Tony was silent, looking at Agatha and she at him. So he loves her and he's been silent all these years. And she thought that she was just not interested in him. But she dreamed how many times that would be to meet a man like her best friend. And Agatha said it all out loud. She just shouted it. Here I am, Tony answered, and approached with determination. I love you. You love me too, or you're ready to love me. And I know it will happen. Marry me, Agatha, he added in a quieter voice. What more do you want? They've already dressed us up for the wedding. There was silence for a few minutes, and then suddenly Steve jumped up and slammed his shoulder into the wooden wolf idol. The pillar fell, resounding throughout the hall. What's that? Asked Tony, who had taken a few moments to get next to Agatha and hug her, scared for her. This means that the master of the house and the family forgives everyone and everything in this room, and whoever asks for anything will fulfill it, Sarah exclaimed, raising her hands to the starry sky. Steve was breathing heavily, looking around at everyone. What else am I supposed to do? Turn into beasts and attack those who came to the houses? Deceive like that? I don't know how. And it's true what they say, wolves have become more savage. But I forgive you, because it turns out my Joe won't marry a city girl, because it turns out that good lives in my house, if you've changed your mind about deceiving me. Papa, don't marry me to a man I don't love. May was the first to speak. And let me go. I'm real. I want to be a teacher in the big world, not just at home. Steve, while we're at it, a stout, red-bearded man got up from the bench. Would you be so kind as to add to the harvest budget? There's no way I can do it by hand. Well, people have invented technology. It's time to keep up with the times. That everything is possible. And an extra day off a week. Some guy gasped, but an older woman lightly tapped him on the back of the head. Think about what you're saying. It's a night like this. Steve, you made me chief accountant, and for that I thank you forever. I'll tell you what I suggest. We don't want anyone saying too much. They're gonna ask me if I'm gonna build a pool. What are you gonna do? Maybe we'll postpone the petition until later. Maybe someone who needs something in writing. Let them do it and fall down after thinking carefully. You've taken everything away from me. Steve waved his hands, his face flushed, breathing hard. Have we kept many traditions? What kind of wolves are we today? Just a prefix to the family name. All of you remember the story of where we came from and how we came to be. And who can tell you what the spirit of the forest is like? No one. All of you joking around and sitting on your phones. Now you can't even ask properly from the bottom of your heart, and in one night, the only night you don't know how to do it. And you know what? I'm sick of it. I'll take my neighbor, the head of the family, and go into the forest. We'll live, we'll do all kinds of trades, we won't be lost. I'm fed up with everything. Let go, Daddy, let go. The same black-haired girl, she'd been looking at him tenderly. Steve, don't ruin it, fell on her knees before him. I'm not of your family, I'm just the daughter of your worker from the village. My grandfather served you faithfully. Forgive me and let me be your son Joe's wife. Accept me into the family. I don't want to get married. Joe exclaimed, and there was so much genuine horror in that voice that Steve laughed. What a puppy. So he's gone on a crime, he's decided to cheat his father. We don't want to get married. Here's for you, he shook his fist under his nose. She'll be your bride for a year, then decide. If she's not nice, I won't force her, I'll take her as my wife. I'm only joking. What are you afraid of? If you don't marry her, I'll give her more dowry than May, and let her choose a normal man. As for you, I turned to Agatha and Tony, who were still standing silent and side by side. You've made a mess of things, so what do we do with you? Forgive and let go, Tony said carefully. It's a special night. That's right, but first things first. Guests have never left the House of the Wolves without gifts, and you, I understand, decided to get married, even if not according to our faith. That's fine, I understand that, but whether you marry or not, I'll take the doctor for myself. You're a bad spring wolf, Sarah grinned, tugging at her husband's sleeve. I agree, Agatha said. She suddenly realized that only next to Tony, she had always felt good and calm, that for many years she had not been able to see her happiness. And even if she had to go through all this now, but she would not repeat that distant mistake. She would not give up on him. Tony looked at his beloved and hugged her tighter. Well, in that case, Steve grinned, I'll give you the apiary until. Sarah turned to his wife. Even if we don't marry our son today, but why should the table set be lost? Whoever's hungry follows me and eats like a wolf. That's how it was decided. The evening turned so unexpectedly that everyone had something to talk about. If it was not the rule at the wolf's table to eat without chattering, there was no silence at all, but never serious talk. Agatha and Tony joined everyone as they changed their clothes. It was strange to stay in such outfits, and Sarah's dress shirt was afraid to get anything on it at all. The next day they said goodbye and left. Agatha tried to refuse the apiary, but Steve shoved her in the side. It's a gift, there'll be resentment. Besides, he was an economic man and knew that it was not a simple apiary, but one with honey, which is willingly bought, and it can bring a solid income. So there would be something to subdue his mother's house, and of course something to settle the family nest on. Agatha took a new look at Joe. Could this be the same man who had once stood in her office and she had angrily thrown at him? Dress off. He was depressed, he was guilty before his father, and he was forgiven. He was the sole heir to his family. And history, a lot of obligations, was burdened by it, but he couldn't renounce it. Well, a new trial was in store for him. The swarthy and black-haired beauty, whose name was Mila, turned out to be a longtime friend of Sarah's, and something told Agatha that now the boy who had once scattered opponents with one hand now had no chance of remaining unmarried, unconquered. May just didn't dance with happiness. Steve promised to pay for any tuition and let her go anywhere as a teacher. He only demanded a promise from his daughter that he would introduce her fiancé and bring her grandchildren to visit her often. On the way back to the city, passing by a grove, Agatha suddenly noticed the first yellow leaves on the trees. "Autumn is coming," she said quietly. "Why, it's very natural," Tony shrugged. "Tony, do you think we'll make it?" "I think life will tell, but I personally will just try to make you really happy."
A young blonde with long legs sat down on her desk and looked around the office, glancing at her co-workers. Putting her foot on her leg, she adjusted her short skirt and took out a cigarette, definitely lighting it. The other reporters couldn't say a word to her, for they knew Kathy was having an affair with the chief, and any careless word in her direction could have irreparable consequences. Take a drag on your cigarette. She felt like the ruler of the office, able to nail anyone who looked at her funny. The girl was overconfident, although she didn't stand out among her colleagues, except for her spectacular appearance, short skirt, and blouse with a deep neckline, showing off her breasts. Having worked at Washington's fashion magazine for a number of years, Katie was thinking of taking advantage of her connection with the chief to take a higher position with a corresponding salary and other privileges. Knowing that the editor-in-chief was highly respected by Joe, she couldn't say a word to him, though she kept thinking about taking over Lily's office. Katie didn't worry about how she looked, because she always knew that the chief would appreciate the next spectacular outfit and slap her on the ass as soon as her co-workers looked away or stared at their computers. Openly using her position, she did not hesitate to show her superiority over her colleagues, looking down on them and constantly joking at journalists who were unable to respond to her in a dignified manner. Remembering how she had appeared in this office, Katie was not ashamed to admit to herself that she had done everything possible and impossible to win the chief's favor. For a long time, he stared at her and licked his lips when he noticed the beauty's luscious form. A couple of months put everything in place, and after the first date, she invited Joe to her home. Finding himself in the predator's trap, he couldn't resist, and from that day on, he became a driven boss, from whom he could always get a more interesting assignment. Using this, she, not infrequently, traveled to the capital and other countries, interviewed popular bloggers and show business stars, creating interesting and fascinating articles. Other journalists were outraged by this, as they rarely left the city and interacted with second-rate stars, whose article no one would ever read. Looking at her watch, Katie noticed that it was lunchtime, put out her cigarette, and headed to the kitchen to have a cup of coffee and discuss the latest news in the world of show business with her colleagues. "How are you doing? Did you meet Rocky yesterday?" questioned one colleague to another, having brewed himself a cup of strong tea. "Yeah, had trouble finding where he lives." The chief had promised an interview with a famous blogger, but it turned out that he was just another loser who got fame because of an unfortunate fall on camera. Talking to him was not interesting and, to put it mildly, not exactly pleasant. "But money can't smell," Lucy replied. "You're the lucky one." "I had to go to a village outside of town yesterday to interview a singer whose voice improves crops. I don't know about the crops, but when she started singing, for a moment I thought my ears were going to bleed. It was so painful and unbearable that I wanted to run away, cower in a corner and cry." Tony complained back. "I thought that being a journalist in a fashion magazine was something special, a chance to meet famous and talented people whose stories were fascinating and gave me goosebumps," Nanny said, coming into the kitchen for a little refreshment. "Why are you always complaining? I just came back from the capital. Do you know how tired I was during the flights, and there was no place in business class? I had to fly with ordinary people who not only can't earn money for a better ticket, but also, it seems, don't know how to use deodorant." Kathy got into the dialogue. "Oh well, why should you complain? You have all the most interesting stars who are ready to give interviews for hours. I had to listen to this rural vocalist for more than 5 hours in order to write even a small note. And then I spent the rest of the night picking up the material, which is not interesting to call interesting. Tony responded categorically. But it's not my fault that I'm the best at what I do, and Joe gives me the most difficult and demanding assignments. Katie replied, trying again to tease her colleagues. Yeah, or just someone who sleeps with the chief unlike the rest of them. Pulling up her short skirt day and night. Quiet, Trey, Lucy muttered, hoping no one would hear that. Did you say something? Katie asked, even though she'd heard it perfectly well the first time. No, you imagined it, Lucy replied, embarrassed, afraid that her colleague would report her to the boss and she would have to find another job. Good, because Joe and I can find you an interesting assignment somewhere in Michigan, where you'll interview a horse, imitating the sounds of other animals. What a laugh that would be. Katie continued to tease her wryly. I'm fine here, Lucy replied, hoping to avoid a conflict situation in its infancy. Her airplane is bad, black, the screen is not real, the champagne is too cheap. I realize that you're a lady of blue blood, but don't forget that we grew up on the same street. Tony answered whip-smartly. So what of it? Who are you? Who am I? Katie reacted to her colleague's remark. I'm a journalist, just like you. We have the same position. Yes, the salary sometimes differs, but here the reason is not in professionalism or experience, but in the fact that I have an affair with the chief, but there is no way. Continued to tease his colleague, the man with a cup of hot coffee in his hands. Oh, who's stopping you? Maybe Joe will like you too. No, thank you. I'm happy with my salary and responsibilities. I just remember when we used to race down by the river and you accidentally stepped on a cow patty. Then you were not such a princess as you are now, and now you are the city's royalty. Don't say a word to her. Don't look crooked. Tony didn't stop, though he realized that this conversation could jeopardize his further existence in the office. Unlike you, I'm abroad, and I'll be taking Lily's place soon, Katie replied, wanting to take the floor or run to the principal's office and tell him everything that had happened in the kitchen. Her face flushed red, her eyes glowed with an evil glow, her nostrils flared like those of an angry bull ready to pounce on his prey at any moment. Well, so who is there to take my place early? Kindly asked a mature woman of short stature in a business suit who came into the kitchen. It's just a joke. You're our favorite boss, and there's no substitute for you. Katie's voice changed dramatically, and she was more afraid of the editor-in-chief than respectful. After all, she was not afraid to tell the chief the truth and could affect the girl's income. That's better, or now when assignments are distributed, Nanny or Lucy will go to Milan, and you will interview an aspiring singer who decided to gain popularity through a relationship with a famous producer. Why can't I go to Milan? Indignantly asked Tony, who also doesn't mind going abroad and attending a fashion show, looking at beautiful girls in expensive dresses. Have you gotten your passport yet? Asked Lily in response. Not yet, but I will definitely take care of it soon. Well, when you do, then we'll talk. So should I tell the chief that you have taken on a singer of non-traditional orientation, or how, with humor in the voice? Asked the woman, glancing at the real nearby blonde. No thanks, but I'd like to go to Italy. Anyway, only there I will be accepted as their own and cannot distinguish from the model. Oh, you're so modest, but go to the chief and tell him. If he approves of your candidacy, you will go to Milan, and if not, they will decide who is more beautiful. I realize that such an opportunity cannot be let out. Kathy hurriedly set down her coffee cup and ran to Joe's house. Knocking on the door without waiting for an answer, she flew into the office like she was running from a fire. A man in a business suit, who was obviously on the phone with someone important, glanced at her casually and waved for her to close the door on the backside. Unwilling to obey, Kathy stayed in the office and waited for the end of the conversation. Yes, I understand, Mickey. Everything will be done to the best of my ability. You know me. No one's gonna find out. I guarantee it. Yeah, I'll be waiting. Joe finished the call and hung up. Hi, Bunny, Kathy said softly and moved closer to the chief. How many times have I told you not to barge into my office like it's your home? And if I wasn't here alone, don't you mind that I was talking to the owner of our magazine, and this conversation was confidential? Indignantly asked Joe, who wanted to raise his voice, but didn't do it when he saw the blonde's gorgeous cleavage. Well, I'm sorry, I didn't know you had such an important conversation. Is it true that one of us has to go to Milan to attend a fashion show and interview the fashion designer Pablo Medin? Unable to contain her curiosity, Katie asked. Yes, really. Lily should come to see me in an hour and we'll decide together which one of you will go. You mean you haven't decided yet? Because I might get offended. You don't have to get mad at me. You realize that everyone's talking about our affair, and it's bad for my image. I will not be treated as a serious and strict boss if I will tolerate the constant antics on your part and even reward trips to the fashion capital. I think I deserve this trip more than anyone. What is it? I'll show you, Katie said as she locked the door. Realizing that no one would be able to enter, the girl slowly approached the boss and began to undo the buttons on her blouse. Joe understood where this was leading, and he had no power to refuse or resist. For the next half hour, the entire office heard only the heavy breathing of the boss, and with each passing moment realized that the chance of anyone getting this assignment was getting smaller and smaller. After the private conversation, Katie left the office, fixed her skirt, and began to comb her hair defiantly, then fixed her lipstick, which had miraculously disappeared from her lips in the chief's office. Lily, the director asked you to come to him, the girl said with a satisfied expression, looking toward the editor-in-chief. Is there any point in going to discuss something? Sighed the woman, realizing that the chief hardly thinks with his head and made a decision without her participation. He's waiting for you, answered Katie, who wanted to hurry the boss, but came to her senses in time, having remembered about subordination. Staring at the monitor of her computer, the girl waited impatiently for Lily's return, anticipating the expected, but no less pleasant and exciting news. Once in her office, the editor-in-chief wasn't even there for 5 minutes. Hurriedly returning to her office a couple of moments later, she went out into the common room to the reporters to make an important announcement. Lucy and Nanny, you get a joint project and attend the next party with the owners of the new combine. Tony, you get a gig as an aspiring rapper at Club Poseidon. Katie, you can pack your bags for Milan. Yeah, what a surprise. Tony started chiming the tray, glancing at Kathy's grinning face. But at least it's not to the countryside looking for female vocalists, and that's good, Nanny sighed in relief. I told you that everything will fall into place and everyone will get what they deserve, Kathy said with her head held high, once again demonstrating her superiority over her colleagues. Leaving the workplace, the girl took the prepared ticket and assignment to prepare questions for the interview and take some good pictures. Returning home, she started hurriedly packing, going through exquisite dresses, expensive shoes and jewelry. Several hours passed like an instant, but the girl still could not find the dress she wanted to show in Milan. In the morning, a few hours before the flight, she managed to stop by several boutiques and choose the most expensive, spectacular, and revealing dress that would make her the centerpiece of the fashion show. After taking a bottle of water and dropping off her luggage, Katie headed to the plane and took her seat according to the ticket she had purchased. Next to her sat a woman with a child, and the girl could not understand where such seemingly modest people got the money for business class. The boy was constantly talking, and it annoyed Katie, so she distanced herself from everything by turning on loud music in her headphones. The people around her annoyed her because they were unworthy to be around a popular journalist of a fashionable glossy magazine. Upon arrival, Kathy checked into one of the older and incredibly expensive hotels in the center of the city. Joe made every effort to create a comfortable environment for his subordinate, and nothing interfered with the preparation of a great interview. Having rested, had breakfast, and walked around Milan, the girl almost forgot that she had to prepare a number of questions. Otherwise, she would look stupid and unprofessional. Back at the hotel, Katie made brief notes and, paying attention to the time, realized that it was time to get ready for the fashion show. The presentation of a new line of clothing was being held in a building that looked like a Gothic-style palace. The sharp edges and spires were striking in their beauty. At the same time, the ancient structure resembled Dracula's castle and scared the crap out of Katie. Taking a few steps on the red carpet, she felt like the Queen of Great Britain walking to her throne. When the servants opened the large gilded gates, Katie almost squealed with delight, but discreetly made her way inside as she was in a hurry to get to the start of the show. After taking a couple of photos, she started looking for the fashion designer and almost mistook him for a nice and caring waiter who offered her a glass of champagne. Having finally met Pablo, Katie asked him some questions and got some very interesting answers. Of course, there were problems due to the fact that the girl did not know English well enough, and with Italian she had even worse. But she and the fashion designer managed to understand each other. The man paid attention to the fact that the girl was not experienced enough to communicate with him, but her beauty smoothed out this problem. At first, Pablo even wanted to call the office of the magazine and complain about Kathy. Well, he forgave her. But the vulgar dress, picked up in Washington, he was embarrassed much more. At one point, the fashion designer couldn't stand it any longer and recommended that Kathy go back to the hotel, because wearing such an outfit would be mistaken for an easygoing girl, and it would cause her a lot of trouble. "What? How dare you? Do you know how much the dress cost?" Katie, who had paid a month's salary for it, objected indignantly. "I'm sorry, I don't know anything about rags," Pablo replied rudely, tired of the tastelessness. "Who the hell are you? Today everyone knows you, and in a week I will forget your name," said the angry journalist, who decided to switch to you. "I think it's time for you to leave. If you think otherwise, our guard will help you find your way out," calmly responded the fashion designer, who waved his finger at the bodyguard. "Thank you, I'll find it myself." Katie snorted, realizing that she needed to leave the building immediately to avoid more problems. Back at the hotel, she couldn't calm down for a few more hours and admiring herself in the mirror. She resented the fact that the fashion designer didn't appreciate her dress. A few hours later, Kathy received a call from the chief asking how the meeting had gone. Kathy decided not to talk about the incident and lied that everything had been great. An hour later, Joe called back. His voice was excited. "It went well, you said," he began. "Yeah, what happened?" Kathy replied with apprehension in her voice. "I just got a call from the fashion show complaining about a rude girl who looked like a country bumpkin dressed as a girl with easy access. What do you think you're doing? I didn't send you there to embarrass me." Joe continued indignantly. "He started insulting me, so I answered him. The girl tried to justify herself. It's your job to listen to what you're told and write it down, not to answer. No one is asking your opinion. I explained these simple basics of your job clearly enough. Don't talk to me like I'm a little girl or a stupid girl. But you're not a little girl. I have my doubts about the other one. Just because you can satisfy me doesn't mean you can be rude to people and jeopardize the reputation of our magazine. Do you understand?" "Yes, I understand. I'm supposed to listen and be quiet," Katie shouted, tired of not being treated like a valued professional, and put the phone down. Having prematurely ended the conversation, Joe tried to dial the girl again, but realized that she did not want to continue the conversation. Katie returned home in the morning and spent the day in bed, as she was allowed to rest after the road and build up her strength before going to work. The next morning, she takes a long time to get ready before driving to the office, as she has to shine in front of her coworkers. Not giving up hope of taking the editor-in-chief position, Katie hurries to work and manages to run into the office a couple of minutes before the boss shows up. Joe was still angry at the girl after the recent conversation, so he decided to bypass her without even looking at Kathy. Such an attitude offended her, but she was still angry with the chief too, so she decided that it was better to avoid the conflicts, as she didn't want to find out the relationship at all. During the next lunch break, Katie did not miss the opportunity to talk to her colleagues and show them her superiority. "But how were the last 2 days?" Tony asked his colleagues. "It's been unbelievable," Lucy replied. "Yeah, unbelievably awful and disgusting," Nanny added. "I agree. I never thought that a corporate party could be so boring and dull. How's it going with you?" "Oh, I've been to that Poseidon. When I got there a half hour early, I thought all the audience and guests would gather later. But it turned out that those 5 people of dubious appearance who were standing nearby were all those who decided to listen to this rapper. I understand everything, of course, but I've never heard a more horrible voice. It seemed to me that the song should have a sense or at least understandable words, but here everything is just past." "Disappointed," said Tony, who had clearly had a better weekend than his colleagues. "And I was on a plane with a creepy mom and a clingy kid. But that's not even close," because in Milan I was promised the most expensive hotel. But they gave me some lair with no safe and no free minibar, intervened Katie, who decided to complain about her business trip. Yes, indeed, no minibar. It's a disaster. How can you only tolerate such conditions? Replied Tony with a sneer, who was tired of listening to the royal request of his colleague. I don't know, but I hope it will be easier when I'm editor-in-chief, Katie replied, not realizing that her colleague was openly joking with her and grinning, waiting for some stupid or ridiculous reaction. Who's going to fire me again? Said Lily, who had not caught the journalists at their desks again. Oh, come on. No one is going to fire you. But we understand the age, and grandchildren will soon start growing up. Someone has to take care of them, Kathy replied, her voice softening considerably as she was startled by the unexpected appearance of her boss. The grandchildren are still small, so they'll be with the nanny, but I will try to bring you up. That's your first concern, by the way, Lily said, glancing at Katie. What about me? I'm always ready to do anything you tell me to do. We'll see about that. Finish up and get back to your desks. I have some interesting assignments. The editor-in-chief summarized and went to her office to prepare the paperwork. Having received the next assignment, Katie decided that the best way to take the place of the boss was to start to serve, earning conditional pluses. Adhering to this plan, the girl openly sycophanted, running on all tasks and assignments, performing them not qualitatively enough, but as fast as possible. Day by day, she collects pluses and has no doubt that in the near future she will take Lily's place or at least become her assistant. A couple more days go by and Joe asked everyone to take a break from work and gather in his office in 10 minutes. Come on in, have a seat. I have what I think is great news for you, Joe said as soon as his subordinates entered his office. Have you decided to fire Kathy? Tony decided to make a joke, but he realized from the look on the director's face that the joke had failed. I'll think about which of the journalists will be out our magazine, the boss answered, frowning one eyebrow. So what did you want to tell us? Lily wondered, trying to prevent a conflict situation and to save Tony from the chief's anger. Very soon there will be a new employee in our team. It is a young girl who will become an ornament of our team and, I hope, will help to increase the rating of the magazine. Another journalist, Lucy asked. No, your staff is fully staffed and does not need additional personnel. On the contrary, there is one more extra place, but that's not what I'm talking about now. I've decided to bring in an assistant editor-in-chief to lighten the load on Lily. Besides, fresh ideas and creative projects won't interfere with the development of our magazine. What? An assistant editor in my place? Katie was very indignant, not hiding her displeasure. What do you mean, Doris? Someone promised it to you, Joe retorted dryly and rudely. I'm supposed to be Lily's assistant. I'm the only one worthy of the position. I've been working in the company for more than a year. I deal with the most difficult tasks, and I know what our magazine needs, continued the girl. Maybe you'll take my place right away, Lily decided to joke. Maybe, but you're not going to quit yet, Katie replied wryly, not realizing that she was being mocked. All right, that's enough of this buffoonery. I am the boss here, and I decide who will work in what position. Tomorrow, the day after tomorrow at the most, there will be a new person in the office. Please respect my choice and understand it. If anyone objects, we'll say goodbye. And I'm not kidding, Joe threatened, with Nancy saying it would tame Kathy. Leaving the chief's office, the girl could not calm down in any way. On her red face were written all the emotions, all the anger, which she was ready to take out on the first person she met. Realizing this, neither Lily nor her colleagues dared to talk to Katie and tried to distance themselves from her, hiding behind their monitors. The girl ran from one corner of the office to the other, throwing pens, paper clips, and other stationery as she went. Katie wanted to go back to Joe's office and tell him what she thought of him, but she held back for fear of ruining the relationship and losing her only leverage with the boss. The next day was not much different from the previous day. Everyone was eagerly awaiting the arrival of the new girl, and only Katie was unlike herself. Her face was swollen with anger and her lips were trembling slightly, as if she were ready to pounce on the new girl and bite her, quickly freeing up her position as assistant editor. In the office, as in any team, Rumors soon start to spread throughout the floors during the lunch break. Katie finds out about them too. Did you hear what they're saying in human resources? Our new girl just graduated a couple years ago, and this is her first job, Lucy told her coworkers. Yeah, there's that. And I also heard she's from some backwoods village near the city, Tony added. Great. Not only is she inexperienced, but she's a country girl. I don't know what Joe was thinking when he hired her. Kathy commented on the rumors. Maybe she's a good person or someone recommended her, Nanny suggested. Yeah, or maybe she just did the chief some kind of favor, Katie replied angrily. So she did like you? Tony asked with a smile. When he saw his colleague's face change, he regretted what he had said and wanted to leave the kitchen, but he didn't have time to do it. I may have some influence on the chief, but I didn't get the promotion. My relationship with him has no bearing on my career, Katie said firmly, even though she realized she was deceiving not only her colleagues, but herself as well. Anyway, nobody asked us, and we'll have to work with whoever comes. Nanny summarized and went to wash the cups, cleaning up after the lunch break. But we'll see about that. I realize we're not in the capital, but how can a redneck talk to the stars? And since when did we start hiring everyone in the office? I feel like the chief forgot to lock the door and hired the first person who walked in. Maybe she wanted to warm up or thought that they feed the homeless here, continued aggressively saying Katie to the girl, whom no one had seen yet. Well, why would you do that? Maybe she's a good person and she'll make a good specialist, Lily suggested. Please, how can a recent student with no work experience turn out to be a good assistant to the editor-in-chief? We used to invite specialists from the capital, even a guy from England, and now we'll spend a couple more years picking up staff under the bridge. But don't go overboard. You're not the capital's FIFA either, the editor-in-chief replied sharply. The girl wanted to try something to object, but realized that any harsh word would put a cross on her efforts and finally spoil the relationship with the team. After the lunch break, Lily again handed out tasks, among which there was nothing interesting and unusual. Katie had to prepare a story about the trip to Milan. Lucy and Tony were preparing their materials for the issue. Nanny had the opportunity to visit the newly opened gourmet restaurant and interview the owner, a well-known restaurateur by Washington standards. Deciding not to put the work in a long box, Nanny asked Joe to leave early and called a cab and went to the restaurant. Seeing in front of her and the luxurious establishment, the girl could not believe that it was really a restaurant because it looked more like an exhibition center or an art gallery. At that moment, the door opened in front of Nanny and a cheerful gray-haired man came out to greet the guest. Hello, are you Nanny? The stranger asked kindly. Yes, excuse me, and you? Shyly answered the girl. I'm Anthony, the owner of this establishment. Nice to meet you. I just have a few questions for you. Let's go inside and I will answer all your questions. Anthony answered and invited Nanny inside, showing himself as a real gentleman and gallant man. How long have you been in this business? Asked the girl the first question as soon as she sat down at the table. My first restaurant was opened in 2007. I have been passionate about cooking since childhood. I adored the way my mother cooked. The first establishment was dedicated to simple home cooking, but over time the level of dishes grew, as did their variety. How was this restaurant fundamentally different from others? Nanny continued the interview, though she noticed in the man's eyes that he was much more interested in looking at her than in answering stupid and not particularly interesting questions. The main difference of our restaurant is unique chefs invited from Europe. They are able to surprise even the most demanding visitors. Having asked more than 10 more no less boring questions, Nanny finished the interview, took a photo with Anthony and headed for the exit. The man, who did not hide his sympathy, offered the girl to have a cup of coffee and continue the conversation, but was refused. The journalist was confused by the age difference because Anthony was a little older than her parents and she was not in a position to give hope to such a mature man, even if he was a very interesting, imposing man. The next morning was no different from the previous one. All the employees were hurrying to get to their workplaces as soon as possible, so as not to arouse the anger of the boss. Only Kathy was calm and casually chuckled at her hurried co-workers afraid of Joe. Seated on the edge of the table, the girl smoked, frankly demonstrating her fearlessness before her superiors. Lily paid attention to the journalist's behavior, but did not make any remarks as it made no sense. Arriving a little later than usual, Joe entered the office and went up to the second floor. Swinging open the doors, he entered and, taking a step to the side, let a young girl pass in front of him. She was quite small in stature, wearing a drab gray suit and an off-white shirt, hiding behind a jacket that was clearly not tailored to her size. The glare from her large glasses hit her eyes, but it was noticeable that she was very nervous and afraid to look at the journalists who were anticipating the chief's speech. Meet Annabelle. She's going to be the assistant editor-in-chief. Lily, this wonderful and fragile creature, is now in your hands. I hope you two will hit it off and get along quickly, Joe said. Hello, Annabelle. Yes, she and I will work together, the good-natured woman replied kindly. My God, and this will work with us, Katie exclaimed, not hiding her attitude toward the girl. And what do you not usually and modest girl? Tony interceded. Look at her. Not only is she a redneck, but she has no taste. How is this gray mouth should work with famous personalities? Actually, she will not go to meetings or interviews. Try to justify the appearance of the girl Lucy. So then, should we hire ugly people for the position of assistant editor-in-chief? How can such a wretch work in a fashionable glossy magazine? Did not stop Katie. Joe, hearing the girl's unflattering speech, became indignant and began to boil like a kettle that is about to steam from the spout. Kathy, to my office at once, shouted the chief, menacingly looking her straight in the eye. Hearing the chief's order, the girl was in no great hurry to obey, and defiantly and unhurriedly made her way to Joe on the carpet. Sorry, Annabelle, we have such personnel. The man apologized and left to his office. Don't worry, she's like that with everyone. Lily tried to cheer Annabelle up. I'm not worried. I've seen more like her. It's just strange that she doesn't know me at all, and she already allows herself to address another person like that. The assistant editor-in-chief replied. Meanwhile, Joe flew into his office like a bullet and, slamming the door, ran up to Katie, who had taken a seat on his desk. What do you think you're doing? Are you out of your mind or what? Maybe I should remind you where I got you out of. Angrily began to ask the man who didn't want to hear any excuses for such behavior and antics. Oh, as if I couldn't have done it without you, Katie said in response. What could you do without me? You be doing cow's tails instead of interviews. Paul called me and told me how rude you are. It's not the first time I complained, but I put up with it. I try to get you the best assignments, and what do you get in return? Do you want mushroom hunters to find me in the woods in spring or fishermen to catch me on a fishing rod? Stop making things up. I'm dealing with her as I see fit. Don't you dare mess with Annabelle, or you'll be looking for a job somewhere else, the chief warned. But that only made Katie hotter. She nodded approvingly and put her arm around the man's shoulders to calm him down and stop yelling. At the same time, the girl was not going to stop halfway, because she saw her as a direct rival and a person who would take away her higher position. Leaving the chief's office, she returned to her desk and waited for Annabelle, who had gone with Lily for a quick tour of the office, to return. Half an hour later, the editor-in-chief and her assistant returned, not only having toured the building, but also having time to prepare new assignments for the journalist. Tony was the first to get a chance to prove his professional ability, and he had to visit the art gallery and make a small photo report. Katie didn't have any assignments, so the girls let her take care of the current tasks and finalize the old materials. Meanwhile, Lucy received an assignment according to which she should go to the Capitol and communicate with a famous singer who had gone through a difficult parting with a girl. Katie was offended that this time she was not going to the Capitol, and without thinking long, she decided to show her displeasure. Since when is Lucy going to the Capitol and not me? Do you think she's any better than me, Katie? Stop it. Annabelle, and I thought it was for the best. You still haven't submitted your last 2 articles, so focus on them, Lily replied. So you and Annabelle are the ones who decided to send someone who doesn't know anything about clothes or people. You would have sent Nanny to Milan to show her favorite colorful dress to the connoisseurs of high fashion. Oh, well, laugh that would be. Katie continued to sarcasm, insulting not only her colleagues, but also the new girl. This conversation is over. Lucy's going to New York, and you're writing articles. There are more questions. affirmatively stated the editor-in-chief, who enjoys the great authority of the chief. You realize that it's stupid to mess with your boss, and the consequences can be unpredictable. Katie calmed down, or rather pretended that she had cooled down and would not continue the discussion on this topic. The next morning, Tony went to the art gallery to not only take a couple of juicy pictures with world-famous paintings, but also to interview the owner of the gallery. It turned out to be quite nice and pleasant in communication middle-aged man, who gladly answered all the questions of the journalist, showed him several unique works, the cost of which is estimated in millions of dollars. Tony is far from art and does not understand how a canvas with paints can be bought for $10 to $15 or even $50 million, but he is not required to do so. Having received answers to a number of questions prepared in advance, Tony hurried to the office to be there by lunchtime. Meanwhile, Lucy also decided to finish her work as soon as possible and flew to the capital. The day before, waking up in the hotel, she did not put off the interview with Harry in a long box and called the man. Despite all the stardom, he turned out to be a very nice and pleasant interlocutor who offered to move the interview from the recording studio to a cafe, where he could not only talk about the breakup with the girl, but also have a snack, useful to spend precious time. Meeting Lucy in the restaurant, the man seemed to stagger. The girl thought that Kathy was right and her appearance was far from ideal or the world of show business, but it turned out that she looked a lot like Harry's ex, and at first, he thought that the interview was a hoax to meet the lover. After taking a couple of steps towards the girl, Harry realized that he was mistaken and met Lucy. "Hello, are you Lucy? I'm sorry. It's just that you look so much like my ex-girlfriend that I was speechless for a few moments." "Was your beloved so simple and unremarkable?" asked Lucy. "Well, she is a real beauty as well as you. Though I apologize for saying so, just emotions do not allow to speak about her otherwise." "That's okay, but thank you for the compliment. Let's get started and you can tell us what happened between you and Maddie and whose fault it was." "Maybe it's better to talk about you," tried to change the subject Harry, but quickly realized that journalist at work remains a professional and does not recognize any creep in her direction. Realizing that there was no hope to ask Lucy on a date, Harry kindly answered all the questions, poured out his soul, and revealed secrets that allow you to prepare not just an article, but a whole story that can conquer the readers of the magazine. After saying goodbye to the star, Lucy went straight to the airport and returned home in the evening to appear at work in the morning, pleasantly surprising both Lily and her new assistant with her promptness. In the meantime, the office was quiet and calm. As Lucy and Tony were absent, Nanny kept her head down, and the bosses had plenty to do without Katie. Having finished her articles earlier than she should have, she wanted to meet Annabelle and tease her again. She had already prepared a few flat, but very offensive jokes and waited impatiently for Lily's assistant. To her disappointment, all the jokes went unused as Annabelle quickly ran out of the office and left the office before she could pay attention to Katie and the look on her face. The next morning, all the co-workers reconvene in the office and turn in the materials to the assistant editor. After receiving insufficient quality and frankly raw materials, Annabelle says nothing but sits down and tries to finalize the articles, preparing them for publication. During the lunch break, she decides to have a cup of coffee, and going to the kitchen, she meets the whole team actively discussing something. "Did you see the outfit she is wearing today? I thought it couldn't get any worse, but she keeps surprising me," Katie told her co-workers. "But maybe she just doesn't have taste or money," said Nanny, who seemed to be trying to justify Annabelle's behavior, but at the same time she didn't mind laughing at her choice of clothes. "What are you picking on the girl? Let her dress as she wants. The main thing is that our articles suit her, and if there will be edits, then without our interference," answered Tony, who hoped that Annabelle is a simple and modest girl, ready to do someone else's work. "Maybe you will discuss me in front of me," intervened in the dialogue Annabelle, who decided to have a little snack. "Come in and listen. We are not shy. It seems to us that you are a village simpleton, both outwardly and in the head. I don't know what you did to the boss to get you hired, but trust me, you won't be here long," Katie said rudely. Annabelle was hurt and uncomfortable, and it showed on her face. For a moment it looked like she was going to cry, but she held back her emotions, made coffee, and without a word, went back to her office. "Yeah, I thought she was going to cry. Tony commented on the situation, making sure that Annabelle was too kind to be used. I told you she was the village idiot. And so it turned out to be. How can you work at a fashion magazine and be so soft? She's going to get eaten up in every department, whether it's finance or video production for an online magazine, Katie continued. Frankly, I'm shocked. I'd throw my fist at you and pull your hair out for saying that. And she's just standing there listening, Lucy said. A few days pass. Annabelle begins to be bullied not only by Katie, but also by her colleagues. They do not openly harass the girl, but take advantage of her kindness by submitting increasingly poor quality articles, which are short notes and sketches. Annabelle does not respond to the offenders, but works diligently, doing her job professionally. From scraps of phrases and notes, she creates small masterpieces that increase not only the rating of the magazine, but also its readability. The relationship between Annabelle and the rest of the team continues to deteriorate. It creates constant conflicts. After the weekend, it seemed that the situation might get better and Katie would calm down somehow. But she didn't spend the 2 days relaxing, but only to come up with more hurtful jokes and bullying that could be dumped on Annabelle like a bucket of slop. Without putting them off, Katie starts making jokes about the editorial assistant as soon as she gets to work. "Oh, I see our star has stolen her grandmother's clothes again," she said when she saw Annabelle's new blouse. "What's wrong with me? I'm not bothering you. I'm just trying to do a good job and not draw attention to my humble person," answered Annabelle, but realized that Katie likes to tease her, and she's not going to stop. "You took my place, and it would be all right if the chief had hired a competent person with exquisite taste, but no, he wants a country girl. So what if I'm from the country? Does that affect my degree or my knowledge?" "It affects your looks. An assistant editor of a fashion magazine can't look worse than the bums in the dump." "Stop picking on me. You better get to work," Annabelle tried to reply, using her position of authority. Joe, who came to the climax of the dialogue, interrupted the girls and demanded that Katie come into his office. "Are you hitting on her again? How else can I explain to you that she can't be touched?" The chief tried to calm Katie down again. "Why are you so protective of her? Is she your daughter or maybe your wife? Stop making up nonsense. You know I have no one but you. Then why did she take my place? And why did you think you should get the assistant editor's job? Just because you go on the most interesting assignments doesn't make you a good employee." "Oh, that's it. So you want me to humiliate and insult her even more," said Katie, who was ready at any moment to lash out like a rabid dog at poor Annabelle. "Don't you dare touch her or I'll fire you. Believe me, if it's between the two of you, I'll throw you out on the street without a blink of an eye." "Oh, I'm not going anywhere. I'll go to any other magazine. We're not in a collective farm here. There's more choice than you think," Katie snorted back, not doubting her professionalism. "Who needs you? You think anyone else is going to give you that kind of salary? If you play this game, you won't even be writing horoscopes for the village newsletter. Remember, if you hurt her again, I'll talk to you differently. And believe me, you won't like my tone. Now go back to your desk and do whatever it takes to resolve the conflict and not make Annabelle mad. If she says one word, you say goodbye to this office and you're out of here. I hope I've made myself clear enough." "Yes," Katie shouted and stormed out of Joe's office. She wanted to go to Annabelle's office and insult her, but Lily stopped her. Realizing that the atmosphere in the team is unhealthy, the woman decided to unite Annabelle and Kathy, entrusting them with a joint project. As part of the article, the girls were to interview a famous married couple going through betrayal and separation. "Okay, we'll do it in the best way possible," Annabelle replied humbly, even though she had no desire to work together with Kathy. "Yes, we'll have everything ready as soon as possible," Katie grumbled, wanting to strangle the girl rather than work with her on the same material. Deciding not to waste any time, Annabelle immediately contacts Harvey and Nancy to set up appointments for them. She lets Katie choose who she wants to go and interview, but the girl with the perpetually disgruntled face refuses to work, explaining that she doesn't feel well. The naive and trusting assistant editor allows the girl to rest, while she herself begins to study articles about the family and their relationships, digging into dirty laundry and gossip. Meanwhile, Katie asks Joe out on a date and spends time with him. The next day, Annabelle tries to divide up the duties again, but Katie has another business to attend to. The assistant editor again enters her situation and, having called Harvey beforehand, goes to meet him. Once up on the third floor, she rings the doorbell and is greeted by a man with a glass in his hand. "Hello, Annabelle. Come in. I've been waiting for you for a long time." Harvey kindly greeted the girl and invited her into the apartment. "Hello, I realize that this is a sore subject, but can you tell me what happened between you and Nancy?" Annabelle asked, having prepared a notebook, pen, and tape recorder in advance. "Probably any other person I'd chase away, but you're too nice a girl and I won't refuse. The first problems in our couple started a year ago. We traveled too much on tour and too little time for each other. I hope that my beloved will take it with understanding and soon everything will get better, but I was damn wrong. When I returned from another concert, I found her in bed with my producer. Now I don't have a producer or a wife. That's pretty much the story." "I see, and you did not try to talk to your wife or to understand the causes and consequences of what happened." Annabelle looked at the man with sympathy in her eyes, but continued to responsibly ask questions in a pre-prepared list. "No, I decided it was a waste of time. She had betrayed me in our marriage, so there was nothing to talk about." "I understand you. I apologize for getting into personal, but how will you divide the property?" "Well, it's simple. We had a prenuptial agreement, according to which everyone gets what he bought during the marriage and will not claim on someone else's property. Tell me, have you already thought about writing a song related to these events?" "No, I wouldn't want to capitalize on my disappointment. So now I've taken a little pause and I want to find a new producer." "Okay, I get it." Annabelle answered kindly and asked a couple more formal questions, bringing the interview to its logical conclusion. Having collected the necessary materials, she left the man's apartment and immediately called his wife to meet her too. An hour later, Annabelle was already in a fashionable restaurant in the center of the city, where Nancy was waiting for her. "Hello. Thank you for responding so quickly and agreeing to meet me," Annabelle said as soon as she saw the woman. "You're welcome. I'm always happy to talk to journalists," replied Nancy, who used all these interviews to drum up interest in her person. "Tell me, did you really cheat on your lover with his producer?" "Yes, and I don't regret it at all. Now Aubrey's going to take care of me and do everything he can to make me a star." "Don't you feel bad about losing your marriage over this?" Annabelle asked with incomprehension. "Who think that marriage is something special, holy, and indestructible? Maybe, please. I've only benefited from it. While my husband bites his elbows, I have over 10 concerts scheduled. I used to have no more than one show a month, and now I'm booked more often than foreign stars." "I see. So everything suits you and you don't regret what happened?" "No, no, and no again. If I had the opportunity to replay everything, I would do it again, seducing the producer right in front of my husband." "Didn't you love him?" "I did, but that's in the distant past. Besides, I love money a lot more, and I'm tired of depending on Harvey." "Thank you for your honesty. If I have any more questions, I can call you." "Yeah, sure. You're a very nice and pleasant girl, so you can call anytime," Nancy replied kindly. The next morning, Annabelle began analyzing the material she had collected and preparing to write the article. Having met Katie, she offered her to work on the material together, but the girl again ignored the offer, as she had not slept well because of dancing in a nightclub. Annabelle realizes that the subordinates are frankly lazy, but does not want to go to the conflict and decides to prepare an article without her participation. Soon she meets Joe, and he reminds her that before the article is published, there should be a presentation of the material where Harvey and Nancy will be present. If they approve of the material, it will go into publication. It is strictly forbidden to disregard their opinion. Otherwise, the magazine will be sued, and there will be almost no chance to win the case. Annabelle spent a whole day to collect and prepare information, to structure it correctly, and to make the story really interesting and creative. Katie realizes that the presentation is less than 24 hours away, and she knows nothing about the upcoming publication. Asking Annabelle to cover for her won't work, so the girl decides to go another way. At night, she sneaks into the office, gets into Annabelle's computer, and downloads all the information from there. Back home, Katie carefully analyzes the material and the developments of the assistant editor to know the material as well as, and preferably better than, its author. At first, she wanted to just use the knowledge to avoid looking stupid during the presentation, but then she decided that it could be used against Annabelle and ruin the chief's good relationship with her. Arriving at work an hour early, Annabelle rushes to Joe's carpet. "Hey, honey, I've got Lully's presentation all set up and ready to go." "Hey, what do you mean prepared? You did the paper alone. I thought it was your joint project with Annabelle." "Oh, she said that the boss wouldn't lift a finger and I should do it all by myself." Katie blatantly lied, taking advantage of the principal's gullibility. "Well, all right. So tonight at 20 o'clock there will be a presentation. If you do it right, I'll consider being more loyal to you and forgive you for all your recent antics," Joe replied condescendingly. "I had important plans for tonight. Can we move the presentation to 6 o'clock p.m. if possible?" Katie asked, realizing that Annabelle wouldn't know about it and wouldn't show up on time. "Okay, I'll try to work something out. Don't forget to let Annabelle know that the meeting has been rescheduled and will be 2 hours early." "Okay, I'll call her," Katie agrees, even though she realizes she won't. In the evening, everyone is preparing for the presentation and the gala event. Sumptuous outfits, an originally decorated hall, and exquisite restaurant dishes fill the space of the office, which has radically changed its appearance. Soon the first guests appear on the doorstep and are personally greeted by the Joes. Harvey and Nancy also do not make themselves wait, as if they had agreed in advance to come. Simultaneously, everyone takes their seats and the lights dim. The presentation begins, during which Kathy shines and impresses everyone with the quality of her article. Harvey and Nancy applaud. They are delighted with the material and want it to be on the cover of the magazine in the morning. At the end of the presentation, the stars and office staff were in for a little surprise, as Joe had ordered a celebratory fireworks show. Watching the night's show, he praises Katie for the job she's done, but is surprised by Annabelle's absence. "You're just lovely. The material turned out great. Harvey and Nancy are thrilled with what you've done. By the way, where's Annabelle? Did she get held up or did something happen?" Annabelle says she wasn't feeling well and couldn't attend the presentation. "I have to admit, it's not the first time she's said that. And I thought she was just lazing around, ignoring the joint project." Katie continues to lie blatantly, taking advantage of the boss's gullibility. "That's weird. That's not like her at all. Maybe something really did happen." Joe began to worry. He tried to dial Annabelle, but the girl didn't answer the phone. "You see, she just doesn't have time to do her work, and you accuse me of nagging her." "Okay, I'll talk to her tomorrow." Kathy, who had successfully realized the cunning plan, was over the moon and considered the salute as a victory celebration, foreshadowing a promotion. She had no doubt that Joe would fire Annabelle, who had failed a responsible project, and Katie would take her place. While the girl drinks champagne and smiles wickedly, considering herself a winner, Harvey and Nancy decide to talk to Joe. As it turns out, they know each other well and have crossed paths more than once at celebrations. "Hey Joe, that was a great presentation. We love it. A little bit more and we would have woken up the desire to make up," admitted Harvey. "I agree, the material was phenomenal," Nancy added. "Hi, thank you. We tried our best." Kathy did her best to get the most out of herself. Joe happily accepted the compliments. "Who's Kathy?" With a look of incomprehension in his eyes asked Harvey. "I mean, Kathy is our journalist. She's been doing a story on you." "I don't know who we're talking about, but we were interviewed by a girl named Annabelle." "That can't be right." Joe was surprised and called Katie over to introduce her to the family. "Hello, girl." Harvey and Nancy greeted the reporter synchronously. "This is Kathy. She was writing an article about your personal life and the disaster your family had to face." "This is some kind of imposter. We've been talking to a completely different, more sweet and gentle girl, and this is the first time we've seen this Kathy of yours," Harvey replied, causing Joe to look surprised. "You must be confused about something," Katie interjected, but realized from the look on the stars' faces that she had done it in vain. "So you're not only a fraud and an imposter, but you're also cheeky," Nancy retorted, realizing that Kathy was using someone else's work and passing off the article as her own. Joe put the simple puzzle together in his head and realized what she was talking about, trying not to slip up in front of his friends. He apologizes for the inconvenience and, grabbing Katie's hand, leads her away. "Now tell it like it is or I'll fire you," Joe threatened. "Tell me what?" I was getting ready, but it was really Annabelle who drove up to meet them. "But I wrote the article myself." Katie continued to deny it. "Tell the truth or you'll be out collecting change tomorrow," the chief said even more threateningly, shaking the girl violently. "I didn't do anything. I just downloaded the article from her computer." "Did you do something with it? Why isn't Annabelle at the presentation?" "She just doesn't know. She thinks the meeting is at 8 p.m., Katie admitted and started crying to elicit pity from the man. Joe no longer gives in to the girl's tears as he has lost the last of his trust in her. Running to his car, he got behind the wheel and without wasting a minute, he headed to Annabelle's house to apologize for the embarrassment and invite the girl to the party. As he pulled up to the driveway, he met the girl just as she left for the party scheduled for 8 p.m. Running up to Annabelle, Joe felt guilty and wanted to fall to his knees in front of her, but held back to save the face of the powerful principal. "Hi, Annabelle. No need for a cab. I'll drive you myself." "Hello, Joe. Is something wrong?" Annabelle asked anxiously, as she didn't expect to see her boss outside her house. "Get in the car. I'll explain everything on the way." "Tell me," Annabelle said as soon as she got into the chief's car and buckled up, realizing that this situation was unpleasant. "I don't even know where to start. The thing is, the presentation has already taken place," Joe began to tell her, stammering all the time. "How did it happen without me?" "That's exactly the problem. Kathy stole your work and passed it off as her own. To set you up, she asked me to move the presentation to 6 p.m., and I fell for it. Please forgive me for that. Do you want me to fire her?" "No, don't. I realize she doesn't like me, and I don't blame her. She thinks I'm taking her place, even though I don't see the logic in it, because I'm not applying to be a journalist. You're a good person. Thank you for understanding." Joe sighed with relief, realizing that he had avoided a conflict situation. After arriving at the party, Annabelle does not communicate with Katie and does not pay attention to her. Meeting the family, she receives words of gratitude and informs that she has prepared another surprise, which the journalist did not manage to steal. As it turned out, Annabelle prepared a small slideshow, collecting unique photos that are almost impossible to find on the web. This caused general delight and applause, but Katie, embittered at everyone, ran away from the party. The next morning, everyone was waiting impatiently for Kathy's arrival, realizing that after yesterday, she was waiting for a serious conversation with the chief. As soon as the girl appeared in the office, Lily invited her to her room to prepare her for the dialogue with Joe, and at the same time to try to shame her a little. The woman tried to see in Katie the torment of conscience or regret, but after a couple of minutes of communication realized that she would find neither the first nor the second. Realizing that dialogue was useless, she let the journalist go, allowing her to go to the chief on the carpet. "Hello, Joe. You wanted to see me?" "Well, hello, Katie. Come in. Close the door and don't forget to lock it with the key," the man answered in a rather soft and calm voice. For a moment, the girl thought that there would be no scandal, but she was wrong. "Come here, before I strangle you," said the chief in a voice sharply coarsened with anger. "I'll explain everything. There's a reasonable explanation. You lied to me, made a fool of me in front of famous people and my friends, stole from Annabelle, and you want me to listen to you. I'm sorry, I won't do it again." Katie began to childishly apologize, realizing that any excuses were meaningless. "You're not in kindergarten. If it wasn't for me being nice to you, you'd be in the stock market by now. Get it through your chicken head. If Annabelle's husband comes to the office tomorrow, it won't just be you, it'll be all of us. What are you trying to do? You want to feed the whole staff. How are you gonna look them in the eye after that?" Joe tried to shout at Kathy, but he could tell by the look on her face that it was hopeless. "Why are you so scared of her husband? He's some kind of gangster or something." "I wish he was a gangster," the man replied sadly and sent Kathy away as he didn't want to see her again. Trying not to stir up office conflict, he instructed Lily to find her a job that would keep her out of Annabelle's sight for a few days. Joe hoped that this would be enough for the situation at work to resolve itself, and Annabelle's husband did not want to meet with his faker wife's boss. During the lunch break, Katie behaved discreetly. At one point, other journalists thought that she ran away from the office, but returning to their workplaces, noticed that the girl simply did not stick her nose out from behind her computer. Toward the end of the workday, Lily let everyone go early so she could talk to Katie one-on-one. She knew there was no point in appealing to reason, so she simply reminded the journalist of who she was and where she belonged. "Katie, I'm not going to argue or get personal, but I will remind you that I am the editor-in-chief and Annabelle is my assistant. Yes, you have a relationship with Joe, but if you ever hurt Annabelle again, I will make your life in the office unbearable. I hope you hear me and understand." "Yes, Lily, I'll try to control myself," Katie said with difficulty, not liking the idea of trying to control her. "Okay, try. In the meantime, I've arranged a business trip for you to California. There's gonna be a little rock festival there. They say it's not just young bands, but forgotten legends as well. Take a little trip, clear your head, and get some work done. Hopefully, it'll help you come to your senses. Otherwise, we'll have to say goodbye." "Thank you. I won't let you down," said the journalist, who didn't want to go, but couldn't refuse the assignment prepared by her boss and editor-in-chief. Returning home, Katie leisurely packed her things and drove to the train station. Having bought a ticket, she did not want to get on the bus, but she realized that there was no choice and she had to go to California. Once there, Kathy tried to rent the most expensive hotel, but even the presidential suite looked worse than her first apartment. Realizing that this hideous interior surrounding her on all sides was the best thing in town, Katie became even more sad. She had just recently been in Milan interviewing a famous fashion designer, and tomorrow she had to attend a rock concert in an abandoned hangar, which, if the circumstances were unfortunate, could be her last. The next morning, she tried to find a decent restaurant and at least entertain herself by visiting a spa. Realizing that time is inexorable, the girl tried to order a cab and found out that no driver wants to come even close to this hangar. Realizing that the party would be memorable, Katie dreamed of escaping, but couldn't do it as she didn't want to lose her job. Finding herself in the hangar, she was pleasantly surprised because outside the sad and dull building inside was filled with light and spectators who supported their favorite rock performers. The girl managed not only to make some bright photos, but also to have a good time, forgetting about all the bad things. Back in Washington, Katie thought that she would be able to get away from the problems at work and avoid socializing with Annabelle. Keeping her promise to Lily and Joe, the next morning she rushes to work in good spirits and, showing up at the office before anyone else, prepares a fresh article for publication. Other co-workers also come into the office and, surprised to see Kathy so early, go about their business. Half an hour later, Annabelle appears in the office. Drawing attention to herself, the staff began to laugh quietly, trying to hide a smile. The girl's new dress was so ridiculous and scary that even Lily could hardly contain her emotions. "Oh my God, look at this miracle in feathers." Katie, who had promised herself to keep quiet until the last moment, couldn't stand it. "It's you." Tony tried to stop her colleague. "Don't you look in the mirror when you go to work? The scarecrow was prettier than you." Of course, I understand everything, but it is impossible to keep silent," continued the girl. "Why are you always picking on me?" "I didn't touch you. I didn't hurt you," Annabelle answered. "And you try to say a word to me, I'll put you in your place. And I don't care about work. I'll be wagging my finger tomorrow and there will be a line of people like Joe coming to offer me a job." "Are you sure?" Annabelle asked, looking the girl straight in the eye. "I'm sure, but who else would hire you? If it wasn't for our good-natured chief. You're an ugly woman with no taste, and I truly feel sorry for you. I don't understand how you could be invited to a fashion magazine, because people like you should be scaring crows in the garden and organizing rallies against the infringement of women's rights." After receiving a barrage of unfair criticism and listening to the wave of insults, Annabelle could not stand it and began. She wanted to respond to Katie in an equally defiant and insolent manner, but tears prevented her from saying a word. Realizing that she had been humiliated in front of everyone, Annabelle runs away. The others realized that this could turn into a real scandal. While colleagues begin to murmur among themselves and discuss the consequences of what happened, Katie stands with her nose held high because she is proud of herself and wants to hear compliments from other journalists. She is even happier that the path to the assistant editor's seat is free again. The next morning, Annabelle does not appear at work, and Katie is finally convinced that she was able to get rid of her rival, keeping her from taking a better position. Joe was on a business trip and was unaware of what had happened. When he arrived at the office, he noticed that Annabelle was absent and asked where the girl had disappeared to. None of the journalists dared to answer him, and Katie hid behind the monitor so that she was not visible at all. Realizing that no one would answer his question, the man invited Lily to his office, realizing that only this saintly woman could tell him everything that had happened during his absence. "Come in, sit down. Tell me where Annabelle has disappeared to." "You see, Joe, something happened here, and I'm not sure that Annabelle will come to the office again." The woman began to crumple, not knowing how to tell about what happened and delicately choose the words. "What happened? Did someone hurt her?" the boss asked excitedly. "Well, you could say that." "Who and what dared to say to her?" Angrily continued the interrogation Joe, although he already assumed that it was about Katie. Nobody seemed to mean any offense, but it was awkward. "Hurry up, Lily, we may not have much time." "It's Katie. She made a joke of the girl's appearance and she cried." "Oh God, I'm so sick of you. The women's group is worse than a viper's den," Joe exclaimed, clutching his head. "But I wanted to stop it, but I didn't have time." The woman tried to justify herself, afraid of losing her job. "Get Kathy, if it's not too much trouble," the man replied kindly, though his eyes showed the anger he was ready to lash out at anyone who didn't protect Annabelle. "Katie, the chief wants to see you," Lily shouted as she left the chief's office. Katie realized that this did not bode well, but accepted her lack of choice by calmly following the closed door. "You've lost your fear. I warned you. I asked you. I begged you. But why are you so stupid? It's so hard for you not to touch her. You decided to play with fire. Now it's going to be bad for all of us and you first of all. Why are you so worried? She's offended. She'll be back tomorrow and everything will be fine. And if she quits, good riddance. I'd rather fire you. Although maybe it's better to run away first, for example, in Spain or better in Australia. So that's surely not found," said Joe and began frantically running around the office, gathering his things. "What's the matter with you? What are you afraid of? Can you explain it to me?" asked Kathy, clearly not understanding what was going on. "If her husband comes, you'll understand why I'm making such a fuss. That country girl has a husband." "Oh, you're funny. Why are you afraid of him? He's probably a tractor driver or a watchman in a candy factory." "Go away," shouted the chief, who did not want to continue an empty conversation with an annoying journalist. Grabbing his cell phone, Joe wanted to call Annabelle and tell her what he didn't know about what had happened. He hoped he could explain everything and have time to apologize for Katie's behavior, but it was too late. Leaving the chief's office, the girl opened the door and saw a tall man blocking the passage in front of her. Realizing that there was no way to make it up, Katie took a couple of steps back. Seeing the man in the doorway, Joe collapsed into the chair, nearly passing out. "Well, hello, Joe," said in a rough voice an unknown man in an expensive suit worth at least several thousand euros. "Good afternoon, Mickey," said the director, stammering slightly. "Who hurt Annabelle?" "No way. You just misunderstood. No one hurt her. It was just a bad joke, and I wanted to call to apologize." Joe tried to justify himself. "From the description, it's you," Mickey said menacingly, glancing toward Kathy. The man's hard and piercing gaze was so intimidating that it made the girl want to go to the bathroom. At that moment, she regretted all the jokes and teasing she had used to taunt Annabelle. "I didn't mean to hurt her. They were just jokes. I'm sorry," Katie replied in a pitiful voice. "My wife has no secrets and she told me everything. You called her a country bumpkin. Well, I'm from the village too. Who's gonna be the first to make a joke about me or maybe come up with a funny quip? Let's have some fun together." No one was making fun of anyone. She just misunderstood me." The journalist continued to justify herself, but all her attempts were in vain. "Look for a new job," Mickey summarized and closed the door behind him. "Who is this guy?" asked Kathy to Joe. Once the two of them were alone in the office. "Mickey, the owner of our magazine and husband of Annabelle, whom you managed to offend." "Congratulations. You and I and the whole office are now unemployed. So the owner of the magazine is from the capital. What are he and his wife doing here? They got tired of the metropolitan life and decided to move back to their hometown. Annabelle did not want to sit on her husband's neck and decided to realize herself by getting a job in our office. What are we going to do now? Katie asked in confusion. Look for a job, and believe me, if the others have any chance at all, you're doomed, Joe answered and started packing. After leaving and locking up the office, he informed the staff that they were all unemployed and could go home. They could thank Kathy for that, who had decided that her ego was more important than the lives of the dozens of people who worked in the office every day. The girl realized that now a barrage of criticism would fall on her, and trying to avoid a scandal, hurriedly ran out of the building. Back home, she cried and realized that she had broken the life not only of herself, but also of her colleagues. The next morning, she gathered her thoughts and began calling other magazines looking for a job. After a few phone calls, Kathy realized that finding a decent job with good pay wasn't as easy as she thought. Some said they were fully staffed, others declined her services and attributed it to a personal request from Mickey. With each subsequent call, the girl realized that she had less and less chance of finding any work in her specialty. Soon her luck smiled, and the director of a small publication invited her for an interview. Gathering herself, she hurried to the meeting and prayed that everything would be successful. Once on the threshold of the building, Kathy crossed herself and went inside. The secretary met the girl and led her to the chief. Hello, my name is Kathy. I called you the other day. Hi, come in, I'm Arnold. You said you had a position for me. Can you tell me a little bit more about it? Yeah, we recently laid off our horoscope man. Do you have experience in that niche? Are you kidding or are you serious? No, I'm dead serious. Something's wrong. I was hoping you'd offer me the editor-in-chief position, or at the very least, invite me to be a celebrity columnist. No, I'm sorry, but we have a full staff and this is the only spot available. I'm sorry too, but I didn't spend all those years studying and working at a prestigious magazine to write horoscopes for the back page of your newspaper, which will only be read by a couple of grandmothers, Katie said rudely, realizing that she was being offered a terrible job with minimum wage. Well, in that case, don't you dare delay you, rudely responded the man who decided to refuse the girl's services. Goodbye, Katie replied and left Arnold's office, slamming the door loudly. For several days after that, the journalist continued to call newspapers and magazines in search of a more suitable place. Realizing that there was no choice, she again dared to call Arnold and was agreed to the position of a man who compiled horoscopes. But it turned out that this position had already been filled by a less fastidious person who was willing to work for a small salary. Losing all hope, Kathy decided to call her old coworkers. She believed that one of them would help her or offer her a more interesting job, since they were not subject to Annabelle's husband's ban. Hi, Lucy. How have you found a job yet, or are you looking for one too? Asked Katie, getting through to one of her coworkers. Hi, Katie. Yeah, I'm fine. I got a job at a rival magazine. The pay is a bit lower, but the bosses are good and the staff are nice. Oh, I see. Do you have room for me? You're not cut out for a simple and lesser-known magazine. I thought you wanted a bigger salary than before. No, I'll take whatever you want, since Annabelle's husband made sure I wasn't hired by the prestigious glossy magazines. I'm sorry, I can't help you. I got this job with difficulty and I don't want to ruin my relationship with the management because of an arrogant upstart. Lucy answered rudely and hung up the phone. Realizing that the first option was out of the question, Katie decided to call Tony. Hi, how are you? She asked unobtrusively. Hi, I wasn't expecting your call. I'm doing great. I've become editor of a small newspaper. Cool. Congratulations. How would you like to hire a reporter to do all your assignments? You mean you? Don't be ridiculous. You don't lift a finger unless you're yelled at. I'm not gonna have a relationship with you like Joe, so I don't think we're gonna work. I'd do anything to take me in. I'm sorry, but I've already lost one job because of you. I don't want to lose that one too. Tony replied dryly and hung up the phone just as Lucy had done. Katie realized that her colleagues resented her and, despite having a new job, still didn't want to talk to her. There was practically no money left to live on, so the girl did not hesitate to call the third collie as well. "Hi, Nani, how are you?" Katie asked, having reached the last of the journalists with whom she had worked for more than 1 year. "Hello, yes. Everything seems to be fine. I've been invited to the Capitol and given a position in the head office. How are you?" "I'm fine, but I'm having trouble with work." "Doesn't anyone need such a valuable staff?" Nanny asked with irony in her voice. "There are a couple of offers, but I would like a more interesting salary and vacancy." "Take it, or they won't hire you there either," she said mockingly and hung up the phone, not wanting to continue the conversation with Kathy. Having lost the last hope for a normal job, the girl bought a newspaper with advertisements and started calling vacancies with more or less decent salaries. Getting one rejection after another, she realized that work in the city was harder than she thought. Every decent organization refused her services on Mickey's personal errand. Others simply didn't need the services of a girl who worked as a journalist for a defunct publication. A few more days pass, and Katie realizes that the money is running out. There is no choice left, and she starts calling the remaining ads with the hope that at least someone will hire her. The only one who invited the journalist for an interview was the owner of a shopping center. Realizing that the girl thanked Andrew sincerely, as he was the only one willing to give her a job. The next morning, she started her immediate duties, changing her expensive evening dress into her work clothes. She felt humiliated but realized she had no other choice. Katie did her job diligently and ran around the floors of the mall like a robot, making sure the place was clean and tidy. While cleaning the first floor, she noticed Mickey escorting a gorgeous girl in a beautiful and expensive dress. Thinking that the man was with his mistress, Kathy decided to follow him. Taking out her phone, she wanted to take some compromising photos and upload them to Annabelle to strike back. When she got a little closer, Katie was speechless because the stunning girl in the red evening dress was Annabelle, who was strolling through the boutiques with her husband. Realizing that the revenge plan had failed, Katie was angry with the girl and blamed her for everything that was happening to her now. The girl did not admit her guilt and did not think that her jokes led to this. She was convinced that it was Annabelle who had broken her fate, and her husband had done everything to make her a cleaning lady. Walking along the stores, Annabelle spotted a shabby-looking Katie in horrible clothes with a dirty rag in her hands. Looking her straight in the eye, she didn't give any sign that she recognized her and walked past her as if she was seeing the girl for the first time. A week later, Joe calls Kathy and tells her that Mickey has taken pity on them and decided to rebuild the office. He's already in the office and is waiting for the girl provided she still needs a job. Dropping the rag and mop, Kathy wasted no time and ran to the office. As she swung the door open with all her might, she saw the familiar faces of Nanny, Lucy, and Tony in front of her. Soon in the office appeared and Lily, who, unlike the others, could not run to work due to age. Former employees gather under one roof, and it seems that everything will become as it was before. Having received another responsible assignment from the editor-in-chief, Katie works diligently because she realizes that she no longer wants to lose such an interesting and lucrative job. To return to the shopping center and wash floors, the girl does not want to, as she realizes what hard work is, which is paid with low wages. At the end of the working day, she tries to go into Joe's office to thank him, but it turns out that the door is locked, and the chief was absent from the office. The next day, the team is once again working up a sweat, not paying attention to what's going on around them. Trying to squeeze the most out of themselves, they refuse lunch and the usual tea party. Trying to prove her loyalty to the chief, Katie works as well as the others, and in many respects even surpasses her colleagues. Toward evening, she again tries to meet with Joe, but history repeats itself, and the door to his office is locked. The girl tries to talk to Lily and find out about the disappearance of the chief, but it turns out that she does not know anything either. She receives the assignment by email, and she hasn't contacted Joe directly for several days. This seems strange, since the man did not talk about business trips, and his health is excellent, so he could not get sick. Worried about the condition of her lover, Katie decides to go to his house. Having rung the doorbell, she hopes to see Joe, as suddenly the door is opened by an unknown girl. "Hello, who are you here to see?" the stranger asks kindly. "Hello, I'd like to talk to Joe," Kathy replied, shocked, not expecting to see another girl in her lover's apartment. "Just a moment," the stranger replied and went back into the apartment to call Joe. Minutes later, the man walks out into the stairwell and covers the door. "Can you explain to me who this is?" "This is Jean, my girlfriend. We've been dating for a few months now, and we're planning a wedding soon. As you can see, you don't have your old trump cards, but you won't need them." "What do you mean?" "I'm leaving for the capital tomorrow morning, and I'm not likely to come back." "What about our office?" surprised Katie asks, forgetting about Jean and the breakup with her lover. "I've been invited to a more attractive position, so I'm not going to turn it down. You have a new boss, and you'll probably meet him in person tomorrow morning. I'm sorry, but I have to go. Otherwise, my beloved will have a lot of questions about your night visit." "Goodbye," Joe finally said and closed the door behind him. The next morning, Kathy rushes to the office and tells her co-workers that Joe has left them and is leaving for New York. Who will now be the boss? It is unknown, but it is unlikely to expect anything good. Just then, Annabelle walks through the door and heads for the principal's office. Unlocking the door with her key, the girl calls Lily to her. A few minutes later, it turns out that Annabelle is the new principal who has decided to reassemble the old team. Realizing that she is unlikely to treat her well, Katie becomes an indispensable, but at the same time invisible employee. Trying to keep as quiet as possible, the journalist tries not to draw much attention to herself and hopes that she can latch on to the job and beg forgiveness from the girl she until recently called the village simpleton. Lucy, Nanny, and Tony notice a change in Katie's behavior and don't miss the opportunity to make fun of her during the lunch break. "Are you kidding me?" Tony asked, not hiding his smile. "Yeah, you're gone. I don't know what's going to happen to you," Lucy added. "Where's your pride gone? You've been telling her for so long, telling Joe you get a better job than this, and now you're just sitting on your ass. Are you afraid of being unemployed?" Nanny encouraged the dialogue. "Leave me alone. I don't want to discuss anything." Katie reacted sharply, grabbed a cup of tea, and returned to her workplace, realizing that her life and career directly depend on the girl she insulted. Katie does her job as diligently and efficiently as possible. The journalist is ahead of all the deadlines and expectations of Lily, which causes the respect of the editor-in-chief. A couple of days later, Annabelle leaves the office and, after looking around the office, invites Katie to join her. Realizing that there are no more chances to turn away, the girl goes to talk to her boss. In her mind, she is already saying goodbye to her computer and chair, realizing that she will have to clean the floors again. Most likely, Annabelle couldn't forgive me and will fire me, and she will do it in disgrace, Katie thought in her head, realizing that she had done too many stupid things. "Hi, come in and have a seat," Annabelle began sweetly enough. "Hello, did you want something?" the girl asked kindly and quietly, mentally scrambling for a more suitable opening. "Yes, I read your latest article and I'm honestly pleasantly surprised. Before, you were not capable of preparing such high quality and interesting materials as you do now." "Thank you," Katie replied, embarrassed. She didn't understand why Annabella wasn't angry at all and was being so nice to her. "I thought about it and decided that you've been working here long enough that you deserve a promotion. If you keep working at this pace and don't lose quality, I can offer you the assistant editor position in a couple months. Lily wants to quit at the end of the year, so you can take her place if you perform well." "What? I have a chance to become editor-in-chief?" Katie decided to ask, not believing her ears. "It all depends on you and how hard you work. But yes, there is a chance," confirmed Annabelle. "Why are you being so nice to me when I've said and done so many stupid things?" asked Katie. "You see, it makes no sense for me to hurt you. I've never been a competitor for you and I've always concentrated on my work. You cared about your personal ego ambitions going 10 steps ahead of you. Then you hurt me badly and my husband acted like a man by protecting the one he loved. When I saw you at the mall, I realized that you were able to come down to earth and realized that you are not the navel of the earth. You realize that everyone has to go through this sooner or later. And I'm glad you're past that stage. I mean, I had to get my face in the mud. You understood me correctly. You have passed this path and now you can take up your mind, correcting old mistakes and starting your life with a clean slate. Moreover, now you know the real value of your workplace and will work better than your colleagues so that you don't lose the job you love and a decent salary. I won't fire you since you have learned your lesson. It seems to me that you will never again judge people or try to demonstrate your superiority over them. You're right. I'm sorry for everything, Katie replied, realizing that this phase was necessary. It hurts to fall down your nose in the mud, but sometimes you have to do it, because it's the only way to realize the value of the simple things that surround you every day.
Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe to the channel, like it, write comments if you like the story, and see you on the channel.